Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I pulled into the driveway a little after midnight. It had been a long shift, and I was dead tired. I sat in the car for a minute, just letting the engine idle while I scrolled through my phone. I do that a lot, just sit there before going inside. Sometimes it's hard to get out when it's quiet and dark like that. I live alone in a one-story house, nothing fancy. It's in a quiet neighborhood, mostly older folks, nobody ever really out that late. I remember thinking how dark everything was. Most houses were pitch black except for one or two porch lights down the block. I got out and grabbed my bag from the back seat. My porch light was off, which wasn't unusual. I usually kept it off to save energy. But when I looked up at the windows, something didn't sit right. Every single light inside was on. I stood there for a second, trying to remember if maybe I'd left them on. I do forget things sometimes, especially after a long day. But all of them? The kitchen, the hallway, even the tiny one over the stove that I only use when I'm cooking. The bathroom light. The one in my bedroom that I never use because it's too bright. It didn't make sense. I always turned everything off before leaving. I'm kind of obsessive about it. I even go back inside sometimes just to double check. I stepped up to the front door slowly, bag slung over my shoulder, and tried the knob. Still locked. Just like I'd left it. I paused there with my key halfway into the lock. If someone had broken in, the door wouldn't still be locked. And if someone had a key, well, only two people had one besides me, my sister, who lives in another state, and my landlord, who wouldn't just let himself in like that. I turned the key and opened the door a crack. The air inside felt stuffy, warmer than it should have been. Like someone had been in there for a while. I didn't go inside right away. I just stood there, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no TV. Just the soft hum of electricity and the fridge running. I pushed the door open wider. All the lights were definitely on. Kitchen, hallway, living room. My bedroom door was halfway open, and I could see the light spilling out across the hallway floor. I stepped inside slowly, closed the door behind me, and stood there for a second. My heart was going a little faster now. I don't own a gun, and the only thing I had on me was a set of keys and a phone that was almost dead. I walked through the kitchen first. Everything looked normal. Nothing was out of place. No broken windows or open drawers. The table was clean. My laptop was still there. I reached over and grabbed the biggest knife I could find from the drawer. The hallway was quiet, but I kept thinking I was going to hear a creak or a door close or breathing. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The shower curtain was open, which I always leave closed, but I couldn't remember if I'd left it that way earlier. My chest felt tight. I stood outside my bedroom door for a long time, just listening. I finally nudged it open with a knife and flipped the light switch, even though the light was already on. No one inside. The bed was untouched. The closet door was closed. Everything looked exactly the way I'd left it. I opened the closet anyway and looked behind the clothes. Nothing. I went back through the house again, this time turning the lights off one by one. I checked under the couch, behind the shower curtain, even inside the kitchen cabinets like some kind of idiot. When I was really sure that no one was inside, I sat down on the edge of the bed and just stared at the hallway light I hadn't turned off yet. That was when I realized something. My bedroom window was unlocked. I never leave it unlocked. Ever. It's an old latch that doesn't even seal properly, and it lets in cold air. I had locked it that morning. I remember doing it. I got up and checked, and sure enough, it was cracked open an inch. Just enough. I locked it immediately and backed away. At that point I felt sick. The worst part wasn't that someone had maybe come in, it was not knowing if they had already left. What if they were still somewhere nearby? Watching. I called the non-emergency line, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to call 911 and sound crazy. I told them I thought someone had been in my house, maybe broken in and left. They sent a patrol car out about 15 minutes later. The officer walked through the place with me again, didn't find anything. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing. He said it was probably a prank or someone passing through the neighborhood, but that didn't explain why the door was still locked and all the lights were on. He offered to have someone drive by a few times that night, just in case. I thanked him, and he left. I didn't sleep. I left the lights on that time, all of them, and just sat on the couch with the knife next to me, listening to every little creak and pop the house made. I didn't even close my eyes. Around 4 in the morning, I saw a car slow down in front of my house. It was one of those older sedans with one headlight dimmer than the other. It rolled past real slow, then sped up again and turned the corner. I didn't recognize it. I don't think I'd ever seen it before. I told myself it was just someone driving around. But a minute later, I heard something outside. Just a soft rustling, like grass being stepped on. I turned off the light closest to the window and looked out from the side of the curtain. There was someone in my yard. Just standing there. They weren't looking at the house. They had their back to it, like they were watching the street. Like they were keeping an eye out. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. After a minute, they walked away. Not toward the street, though around the side of my house, toward the backyard. I backed away from the window and grabbed my phone again, hand shaking so bad I almost dropped it. This time I did call 911. I stayed on the line until the cops showed up again. They didn't find anyone, but there were fresh footprints in the grass, circling the house. The cop asked if I wanted to stay somewhere else that night. I packed a bag and left. I didn't go home again for 3 days. When I did, nothing had been touched. No more lights on, no windows open, no sign of anything. But I changed the locks that day, bought a security system, and had motion lights installed around the whole yard. And now, every time I get home, I sit in the car for a few seconds and check the windows before I go inside. It started on Wednesday night. I was living in a third-floor apartment at the time. Not a great place, thin walls, weird smell in the hallway, that kind of thing. It was quiet though, which I liked. Nothing ever really happened there. That's probably why I didn't think too much about it when the knock came. It was 9:13 p.m. I remember because I had just paused a show to go grab a soda. The knock was slow and spaced out, 3 knocks, maybe 4 seconds apart. Not urgent, just steady. I figured it was someone at the wrong door. It's happened before. My place was at the very end of the hallway, next to the stairwell, and I think a lot of people assumed it was the first door on the floor instead of the last. I looked through the peephole. A guy was standing there, probably in his 30s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Short hair, kind of average looking. He wasn't holding anything. Just standing there, hands at his sides. He looked like he hadn't slept much, his eyes were kind of puffy. I cracked the door just a bit, left the chain on. Yeah. He leaned a little closer but didn't really change his expression. Is Caitlin here? I shook my head. Nobody by that name lives here. He didn't react. Didn't apologize or look confused, just blinked a few times like he was thinking. Then he said, "Okay," and walked off toward the stairs. I shut the door and didn't think much of it. Figured maybe he had the wrong floor or she used to live here before me. Whatever. The next night, same exact time, 9:13, same knock. Slow, steady. 3 of them. I hadn't even paused to show this time. Just sat there staring at the door. I got up and checked the peephole again. Same guy. Same clothes. Same blank look on his face. It was like watching a paused scene from the night before. I opened the door a little, kept the chain on again. "You were here yesterday," I said. He looked at me. Same voice, same tone. "Is Caitlin here?" I didn't answer right away. Just stared at him. "I already told you. You've got the wrong apartment." He didn't say anything. Just gave me a long look. Then he nodded once real small and walked away. That time I locked the door with both deadbolts. Friday night. 9:13 on the dot. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. This time I didn't open the door. I watched through the peephole. He stood there longer than the other nights, maybe a full minute, just staring at the door. Then he turned and left again. Saturday, same thing. I didn't even get up this time. Just muted the TV and sat in the dark, pretending I wasn't home. I waited maybe 5 minutes before checking, but he was already gone. By Sunday I started feeling jumpy before it even hit 9. I kept checking the clock. I didn't turn on any lights. I stood by the door from 9:10 to 9:20, watching the peephole. Nothing. No knock. No guy. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. Something about the break-in pattern made it worse. Monday night, 9:13, he was back. Knocked 3 times, exactly like before. I waited until he left, then walked to the end of the hallway and looked out the stairwell window. There's a parking lot below, lit by one flickering street lamp. I saw a silver sedan I hadn't seen before. Not parked in a spot, just sitting in the driving lane near the dumpster. It pulled out and drove off as I watched. Tuesday night, he came again. Same knock, same time. I didn't open the door, but this time he didn't walk away right after. I could hear him breathing. Not loud or weird or anything, just a faint sound through the door, like he was standing a few inches away, waiting. He stayed for almost 5 minutes. No knocking after the first 3. No talking. Just standing there. Then I heard a soft scratching sound. Like a nail or a coin brushing the door near the bottom. Not hard enough to leave marks, but just enough to hear. I was done at that point. The next morning I called the building manager. She was nice about it, said she'd look into it, but also told me she didn't know any tenants named Caitlin, past or present. I asked if the front security cameras worked. She kind of hesitated and said, "Only the lobby one, the others have been down for a while." Wednesday night, I went to a friend's place across town. Slept on his couch. I didn't tell him what was going on, just said I needed a break from my place. I came back Thursday around noon. Nothing looked messed with. Door was locked, lights were off just like I left them. But when I checked the peephole from the inside, the glass was smudged. A little cloudy ring, like someone had pressed their eye up against it. I bought a security camera that night. One of those cheap motion detecting ones you can stick to the wall and watch through your phone. I set it up facing the door from inside the apartment, just to see what would happen. I stayed home Friday night. The camera pinged my phone at 9:14. I checked the live view. The guy was standing there again, same clothes, just staring at the door. But this time he said something. First time he spoke more than that one sentence. He leaned in a little, mouth close to the crack of the door, and said, "She told me she lived here." His voice was quiet, calm, like he was explaining something simple. I stayed completely still. After a minute or so, he backed up and left. I saved the footage. Called the police the next morning. Filed a report. They were polite, said they'd send a patrol through the area in the evenings, but unless he threatened me or tried to break in, there wasn't much they could do. The officer asked if I knew anyone named Caitlin, or if maybe a friend gave someone my address by mistake. I didn't. Saturday night, nothing. Sunday night, nothing. Monday night, 9:13, he knocked again. But this time it was louder. The knocks were sharp. Quick. I watched the camera from my bedroom. He looked different. Not angry, but more focused. Like he'd made up his mind about something. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a key. Held it up. Slid it into the doorknob. It didn't work, obviously. I never gave anyone a key, but he kept trying. Turned it left, right, pushed a little. Then he stopped. Looked straight into the peephole again and said, "Tell her to come out." I called the cops while watching him through the camera. He stayed another 2 minutes, then left. This time they actually sent someone. I showed them the video. The officer took it seriously and said they'd keep an eye on the area. He told me to stay somewhere else for a few nights if I could. I packed a bag and went back to my friend's place. Stayed there a week. When I finally came back, the hallway camera had been fixed. I asked the manager if she'd seen anything. She said she hadn't seen the guy again. Neither have I. But I still check the peephole every night before bed. And sometimes, even when I know I'm alone, I hear 3 slow knocks in my head. Even spacing. Right on time. I don't know what I was thinking when I decided to take that road. It was already late, around 1 a.m., and I was driving back from a friend's place. The highway I usually take was backed up with traffic due to some construction, so I figured I'd cut through this back road I've driven before. It wasn't the best option, but it was quiet, and I just wanted to get home. The air felt still, like the world was holding its breath. The only sound was the hum of my tires on the asphalt, and the occasional click of the blinker as I passed through small intersections. I didn't expect anything weird to happen. It was just another drive, the kind where you're alone with your thoughts and the road. But the first thing I noticed was the streetlights. They were spaced really far apart, and some of them were flickering, casting this weird, dim light. It made everything feel more isolated, like I was in the middle of nowhere, with only the car and the occasional rustling of leaves for company. The road was narrow, and there weren't any houses or buildings around, just fields and trees that blurred in the dark. I had been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I first felt it. That feeling like I wasn't alone. Like someone was watching me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just tired, but I couldn't shake the unease. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind me, but every time I looked, there was nothing. Just darkness, stretching out behind me. But the longer I drove, the more the feeling lingered. It wasn't just the quiet or the darkness, something felt off. I checked the mirror again, and this time, I swear I saw something move. At first, I thought it was just the shadows, but there was a figure in the back seat of my car. I blinked and looked again. Nothing. The seat was empty. I told myself I must have imagined it, that I was just too tired. I kept driving, but I couldn't shake the thought. I glanced in the mirror again, more out of habit than anything else. But this time, the figure was still there. It was faint, but I could make out the outline of a person sitting in the back. My heart skipped a beat. I almost pulled over to check, but then I thought about it logically. If someone was hiding in my back seat, they'd have to be really quiet. And it didn't make sense. I hadn't heard anyone get in, and the doors were locked. I would have noticed if someone had gotten in while I was driving. But the more I thought about it, the worse it felt. I could barely make out the shape in the mirror. It looked like a person slouched in the back seat, their head resting against the headrest. I wasn't sure if they were asleep or if they were just hunched over. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. I tried to focus on the road, but I kept glancing back every few seconds. Each time I looked, the person seemed to shift a little. They were in a slightly different position, like they were moving around, even though I hadn't heard a sound. I started to panic. Was I losing my mind? Was I just tired, imagining things? But it didn't feel like that. It felt real. Every time I checked, that person was closer to the edge of the seat, their shoulders moving slightly, like they were adjusting their position. I turned up the radio to drown out the silence, but that didn't help. The feeling was still there, like someone was sitting just behind me, watching my every move. I kept checking the mirror, but the figure was always shifting. 1 second they were sitting up straight, the next their head was tilted toward the window, as if they were trying to peer out. It didn't make sense. I hadn't heard anything, no door opening, no footsteps. And my back seat was dark. I sped up, thinking maybe I could outrun whatever was happening. Maybe if I just drove faster, I could get to a more populated area. But the faster I drove, the more I noticed the subtle shifts in the back seat. It was like whoever or whatever was there was getting closer, inch by inch, despite not making a sound. I checked the mirror again, and this time, the figure was practically right behind me. I froze. The person was sitting up now, their head turned slightly toward me, almost like they were looking over my shoulder. I couldn't see their face, just a vague outline of them. I had to pull over. I slammed on the brakes and yanked the wheel to the side, the tires screeching as I came to a stop on the shoulder of the road. The car shook, and I sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, trying to steady myself. My pulse was pounding in my ears, my skin crawling. I didn't know what to do. Should I get out? Should I call someone? I looked in the rearview mirror one last time, trying to see if the figure was still there. But now, the back seat was empty. Just the shadows. Nothing else. I was half relieved, but still shaken. I opened the door, planning to get out and check, but before I could move, I heard something. A soft scrape, like fabric shifting in the back seat. I turned my head toward the sound, and that's when I saw it, the figure. They were no longer sitting. They were standing, just behind my seat, their face inches from mine. I didn't think. I just slammed the car into gear and sped off, tearing down the road as fast as I could. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I didn't look back again. I didn't want to. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station. I parked by the lights, sat there for a minute to calm myself, then looked around. There was no one. No one had followed me. I don't know who or what it was. I don't know if I was just imagining it all or if something was really back there. but I'm telling you, I felt it. I know I wasn't just being paranoid. The way that figure kept shifting, inching closer, that wasn't something I could have made up in my head. I don't know if someone was messing with me, or if I picked up a stranger somewhere without realizing it, but I don't take that road anymore. I don't drive at night if I can help it. And I always check my back seat. Always. I started jogging at night because the mornings got too busy. Work kept creeping earlier, and by the time I got home, it was either go now or skip it. So I'd head out around 9:30, sometimes closer to 10, once it cooled down. I live in this quiet residential area just outside a small town. It's mostly older folks and a few young families, so the streets are dead after dark, which I liked. Peaceful. No traffic, no people. Just me, my music, and the sound of my feet hitting pavement. That night started like any other. I stretched in the driveway, earbuds in, mapped out a loose route in my head, nothing crazy, just a couple miles, then set off down the main street in front of my house. It's all lit by those orange glow street lamps spaced out every few houses. I wasn't even 5 minutes in when I noticed headlights behind me. At first I thought nothing of it. Cars come through sometimes, someone getting home late, whatever. But this one slowed down. That's what made me glance back. It was maybe 100 feet behind me, just crawling. Not parked, not pulling into a driveway. Just inching along. I turned down Willow Lane, which is this side street with no outlets. A little loop that reconnects to the main road. The car followed. I was already uneasy, but I figured maybe it was someone looking for an address. I jogged a little slower, like I was catching my breath, just to see what the car would do. It stayed behind me. Still slow, still quiet. No turn signals, no motion inside that I could make out. Just that low hum of the engine and those headlights right at my back. I turned off Willow and cut through the park trail. It's short, just a paved path between 2 rows of houses, maybe a quarter mile. The car couldn't follow through there. I figured if it really was just some lost driver, they'd keep going. When I came out the other side and turned back onto the street, the car was there. Same one. Gray sedan, older model. No plates in front, which I hadn't noticed before. It had stopped just before the trail entrance, headlights pointing right at me. I didn't want to panic, so I kept jogging. Picked up the pace a little. I didn't look back again for a block or two, but when I did, it was still coming. Still slow. That's when I cut through someone's yard. I felt like a jerk doing it, but I knew they had no fence, and their porch light was off. I figured it'd be a shortcut. I jogged across their lawn, through the alley behind it, and came out on a totally different street, Oakview. It's parallel to where I'd been, and there was no way the car could have followed unless they'd guessed. But not even a minute later, I heard the engine again. That low, steady hum. It came from the other end of the street. I looked, and there it was. Same car. Same slow crawl. At that point, I stopped jogging. I pulled out my phone, paused my music, and just stood there like I was checking a text or something. The car passed me slowly, windows up, no one looking out. I couldn't see inside, just my own reflection in the glare of the headlights. It kept going. Turned at the next corner and vanished. I should have gone straight home, but I didn't want to lead whoever it was back to my place. So I waited there under a tree for a minute or two, watching the intersection. Then I heard the engine again, from the opposite direction this time. The car had looped around the block. They were circling. I darted into someone's backyard and crouched between their trash bins. I was breathing hard, trying to stay low, trying not to think about how insane it was that I was hiding from a car in the middle of my own neighborhood. The car drove by again. No hesitation. Just a steady pace, like they were patrolling. I texted a friend who lived 2 streets over. Told him I thought someone was following me and asked if I could crash for a bit. He didn't answer right away. I checked the time, 10:41. He was probably asleep. I waited another few minutes. No reply. Eventually I decided to just head toward the gas station on the main road. It was well lit and open late. Maybe I'd get a ride home from there or wait for the car to leave. I stuck to alleys and backyards, moving quiet. I didn't hear the engine again for a while. The gas station was about half a mile away. When I got there, I stepped inside, acted casual, bought a water I didn't really want. The cashier was this bored-looking guy in his 20s, didn't even glance at me. I waited near the window, pretending to check my phone. A few minutes later, that same gray sedan pulled into the lot. It parked at the edge of the lot, near the side of the building, facing away. Nobody got out. I walked to the back of the store, pretending to browse snacks. I peeked around the shelves but couldn't see the car anymore. I finally got a text from my friend. He said yeah, I could crash, but he was half asleep and asked if I was okay. I told him where I was. He said he'd come get me. I waited in the back of the store, near the fridges, until I saw his car pull in. As soon as he parked, I walked straight out and got in. I didn't look at the gray car on the way. He didn't ask much, just said I looked freaked out. I told him everything in the living room while his dog kept sniffing at my legs like something was weird. He offered to drive me home the next morning, and I said yeah, thanks. I slept on his couch with the lights on. Next day, when we drove past the alley I'd hidden in, I spotted something on the curb. It was my water bottle. The one I'd started jogging with. I must have dropped it when I ducked into the yard. But when I picked it up, the weird part was it wasn't where I remembered dropping it. It was maybe 30 feet further down, near the back fence. I still don't know what to make of that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just forgot. Maybe someone else found it and moved it. But that fence? It leads to someone's garage. And that garage had a broken window. I didn't jog at night again after that. It was a dark, quiet night. I had been driving for hours on the highway, heading home after visiting my parents. The roads were pretty empty, just the occasional car passing by in the opposite direction. I remember feeling a little sleepy, but I didn't want to stop because I was just ready to get home. The clock on the dashboard said it was around 2:30 a.m. The only light came from my headlights and the faint glow of streetlights far off in the distance. It was just me, the road, and the night. Then, I saw him. I almost didn't notice at first. A figure standing by the side of the road, waving their arms frantically. My first thought was that it was someone who needed help, maybe a flat tire or something. I slowed down, just to make sure I wasn't passing someone in real trouble. But as I got closer, I noticed something wasn't quite right. He wasn't just waving for attention, he was almost jumping around, like he was desperate. Something in the back of my mind told me to keep going, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The guy seemed too frantic, too wild. His arms were flailing, but his face was hidden in the shadows. It wasn't until I was almost past him that he took a few quick steps forward and waved directly at me, practically running into the road. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe I was just being a good person. Maybe I felt bad for him. It was one of those split-second decisions that in hindsight felt like the wrong one. I pulled over, maybe 15 feet away from him. I rolled down the window, just a little bit, enough to hear him if he said something. He was standing there, now just a few feet from my car, staring at me. He didn't say anything right away, which made me feel uneasy. There was this weird silence, like everything around us had just paused. I waited for him to say something, but all he did was stand there, his hand still raised like he wanted to ask something. I couldn't make out his expression, it was too dark, but I could see his eyes darting around, and it wasn't like a normal look. It was like he was watching something, or maybe he was looking for something. I cracked the window open a little more, trying to make it less awkward. "Are you okay?" I asked. He didn't respond, just kept staring at me. It felt like a long time, but it was probably only a few seconds. I felt the blood leave my face. It didn't make sense. Who stands by the side of the road at 2:30 a.m. and doesn't speak when someone pulls over to help? Who does that? Finally, after what felt like forever, he took a step closer to the car. Not too close, but enough that I could hear his breathing. It was heavy, like he'd been running. Or maybe something else. His hands were shaking, and I noticed they weren't just shaking from the cold. Something was off. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" I asked, my voice a little shaky, unsure if I should be scared. I figured if I was going to help, maybe I could just get him in the car, drop him off somewhere public. Then I could leave. No harm, right? He didn't say anything. That's when it happened. He suddenly reached for the door handle, yanked it as if he was trying to open it. My heart stopped. The door was locked, thankfully, but the way he tried to open it was like he wasn't even thinking. Just grabbing for it like it was the only thing on his mind. And there was no warning, no explanation. He didn't say I need help, didn't ask for anything. He just tried to get in. I pulled my hand back from the window, hitting the lock button instinctively. I started to drive off, not fast, just enough to get away from him, but not too fast so it wouldn't seem like I was panicking. As I rolled away, I looked in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see him still standing there. But he was walking behind me now, slowly, like he was following my car. Not running, not even looking directly at me. He just walked behind, like it was the most normal thing to do. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep driving forever. But I didn't want to stop again either. So I just kept going, my hands tight on the wheel, my heart thumping in my chest. The road stretched on forever, and I kept checking the mirror, waiting for him to disappear. But he stayed behind me, not too far back. I couldn't tell how long he was following me. My mind was racing, and all I could focus on was the feeling of someone watching me from behind. It wasn't just the rearview mirror that made me feel that way. It was the quiet, the emptiness of the road, the fact that nobody else was around. Eventually, I passed an exit ramp and decided to take it. It was a gamble, I know, but I figured if I could get off the main highway, I might be able to find a gas station or some other place with people. Something where I wouldn't be completely alone. I turned off, hoping he wouldn't follow, but when I glanced back, he was still behind me. Not as close as before, but enough to make my stomach turn. I drove like that for a while, maybe 10 minutes, just going through side roads that were a little more populated. Still, nobody else on the road. I didn't see him anymore, but I didn't dare stop to look around. When I finally pulled into a gas station, I parked in the well-lit area near the pumps, hoping he wouldn't follow. I sat there for a moment, just listening to the hum of the lights overhead. I checked my mirrors again. Nothing. It felt like the longest moment of my life. But finally, I took a deep breath and got out of the car. I didn't even lock it. I just needed to get inside and be around other people. As I walked toward the door, I looked back one last time. The night was still. Empty. I don't know who that guy was or why he acted the way he did. I don't know if he was trying to rob me or hurt me or if something else was going on. But I know one thing, I'll never stop for anyone on the side of the road again, no matter what. I was driving home after a long day of work, and I had taken the highway to save time. It was late, around 2 a.m. or so, and the road was completely empty, except for the occasional car passing by in the opposite direction. The headlights cut through the darkness, but it felt like there was no one else on the road for miles. It was just me, the highway, and the sound of my tires on the asphalt. I had the music low, just enough to keep me awake, but the silence outside made everything feel more isolated than usual. Everything was fine at first. But about 30 minutes into my drive, I heard it. A loud thumping sound, like something heavy hitting the trunk of my car. I flinched and instinctively glanced in my rearview mirror. There was nothing unusual, just the empty road behind me. I told myself it was probably just something in the trunk shifting, maybe my gym bag or something else I had thrown back there earlier. But then I heard it again. Thump. 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 3 solid hits, spaced out like whatever it was had some rhythm to it. I froze. My stomach dropped. There was no way anything in my trunk could be moving on its own. I had made sure everything was packed properly before leaving. And why would it make that kind of noise? I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing, right? I couldn't let myself get paranoid. The road was so empty, I couldn't even remember when the last car had passed. I just kept driving, trying to ignore it. But the thumping came again, louder this time. It felt like it was right behind me, like someone was hitting the trunk with a fist. My heart started racing, and I glanced over my shoulder at the rearview mirror again. The darkness was still there, no sign of any other cars, but the thumping didn't stop. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled off onto the shoulder, my tires crunching against the gravel. I didn't want to open the trunk in the middle of nowhere. It seemed too risky. But I also couldn't just keep driving without checking. I put the car in park, my hands shaking as I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. The thumping stopped. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. I sat there, in the stillness, trying to calm my breath. But then I heard something else. A rustling noise, soft at first, but enough to make me tense up. It came from the direction of the trunk, like something moving around in there. I couldn't stay in the car anymore. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but the fear was overwhelming. I grabbed my phone, just to make sure I had it with me, even though I wasn't sure what I would do with it. There was no one around for miles, no cell service out here, nothing. Just me and whatever was in the trunk. I opened the door slowly, trying to keep as quiet as possible. The night air hit me hard, cold and dry, making my skin prickle. My headlights cast long shadows on the road, stretching across the empty asphalt. I was out of the car now, standing on the shoulder, looking at the trunk. I don't know what I thought I would find. A flat tire? A runaway piece of luggage? But I didn't want to know. The fear was sharp, like a knife in my gut. What if someone had gotten into my trunk? What if someone was hiding in there? The thumping was too deliberate to be anything natural. I took a deep breath, summoning whatever courage I had left, and walked to the back of the car. I reached for the trunk latch, hesitating for just a second. I could still hear that faint rustling, like something shifting inside. My fingers were cold as I grabbed the handle and pulled it open. Nothing. The trunk was empty. I stood there for a moment, staring into the dark, wide-open space. My breath came out in shallow gasps. Maybe I was just losing it. Maybe the noise was from something else. But the rustling had been too real. The thumping had been too real. I slammed the trunk shut, my heart racing. I quickly got back into the car and locked the doors. I didn't want to look back. I didn't want to stay out there for 1 second longer than I had to. I started the car and pulled back onto the highway, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. I drove for a few more miles, trying to calm my nerves, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again. The thumping. This time it was louder, more forceful, like whatever was in my trunk was trying to break its way out. I nearly swerved off the road, my heart leaping into my throat. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I glanced into the rearview mirror. I could see my own reflection, my wide, scared eyes staring back at me. There was no one behind me. Just the road. The empty highway. But the thumping didn't stop. It was coming from inside my trunk, louder now, almost rhythmic, like it was trying to communicate with me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was on the verge of a panic attack, my chest tightening as I tried to focus on the road. I needed to get out of there. I didn't know what was in my trunk, but I couldn't take any chances. My foot slammed on the gas, pushing the car faster, hoping to outrun whatever was in the back. But the thumping just kept going, like it was following me. Every mile felt like an eternity. The noise was relentless, pounding in the background, never giving me a second to calm down. I could hear it over the sound of the engine, over the wind rushing past. I tried to block it out, to focus on the road, but it wouldn't stop. Finally, I saw headlights in the distance. Another car. The first one I'd seen in what felt like hours. I didn't care if they thought I was crazy. I didn't care about anything except getting some help. I pulled into the shoulder, almost too fast, and stopped right behind the other car, hoping they would notice me. I didn't even get out of my car. I just sat there, staring at the other vehicle, my hands still gripping the wheel. I kept hearing the thumping, even though I had stopped. My heart pounded in my chest, every muscle tense, waiting for something, anything to happen. The car in front of me didn't move. I had no idea if they were going to help or not. But when the thumping stopped, I finally felt like I could breathe again. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence. I was sitting on the couch around 10:30 at night, scrolling through my phone with the TV on low in the background. Nothing important, just one of those crime documentaries I've seen a dozen times. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional creak from the heater ticking on and the hum of the fridge down the hall. I live alone, and I like it that way. I keep the blinds closed most nights, but I had cracked one open earlier to let some air in before it got too cold, and I guess I forgot to close it all the way. I didn't notice anything weird at first. Just a normal night. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't a notification or an email. It was an Airdrop request. Which made no sense because I don't have any shared devices nearby. I almost declined it automatically, but something about it made me hesitate. The preview just said img_7643.jpg. I swiped to accept, mostly out of confusion. It was a photo of me. I was sitting exactly as I was in that moment, on the couch, phone in hand, one leg tucked under me. The photo had clearly been taken through the living room window, the one behind the TV, the one I'd left cracked open a few inches. At first I thought maybe it was old. Maybe I'd taken it somehow without realizing. But the TV screen in the picture was showing the same paused scene from the documentary that was still playing behind me. That's when my body went cold. Like a deep kind of cold that doesn't come from temperature. I stood up too fast and dropped my phone. It clattered onto the hardwood and lit up the room more than the TV did. I didn't know what to do right away. My first thought was just someone was outside. Someone had been watching me. I didn't run to the window. I didn't even look at it. I backed out of the room and flipped on the hallway light. The window wasn't open wide, just enough to get a hand through. I stared at it from the kitchen entryway, trying to breathe slow and quiet, like that would help somehow. Then I heard the floorboard creak in the hallway behind me. Just one. I spun around, heart going nuts, and nothing was there. But I realized how many stupid things I'd done. I hadn't locked the back door after I got home. I hadn't closed the bedroom windows. I just stood there trying to listen, like I'd suddenly be able to tell if someone was in the apartment with me. I went for my phone on the floor, picked it up, locked the screen, and texted my neighbor across the hall. Her name's Elise. I just said, "Hey, are you up?" and added, "Can you come over?" Something weird just happened. No reply. I knew she was a night owl. I could usually hear her blender or some late night cooking through the wall. But now it was dead silent. I messaged her again, seriously. "Please come over. I think someone's outside." Still nothing. That's when I realized I hadn't heard any street noise either. Normally there's a car or two passing by, some guy yelling at his dog downstairs, even this annoying kid who skateboards in the parking lot too late. But now it felt like everything had gone flat. I edged back toward the living room window, still avoiding looking directly at it, and reached up slowly to pull the blinds shut. My fingers were shaking. As soon as I pulled the cord and the blinds snapped down, I took a step back and tried to call 911. No signal. I stared at the no service icon like it would go away if I blinked hard enough. I moved around the apartment, holding my phone up, but nothing. Just a dead bar and the spinning wheel. I grabbed a kitchen knife. I hated how shaky my hands were. I wasn't even sure I'd be able to do anything with it if someone actually came at me. I kept thinking about that photo, how close they had to be to get that angle. Right up against the glass. And the airdrop meant they were close. Like within 30 feet. Maybe still nearby. I decided to try Elisa's door in person. I opened mine slowly, knife still in hand, and peered into the hallway. It looked normal. Dim yellow light from the wall sconce. Faint buzzing from the vending machine downstairs. But still quiet. No voices. No movement. I padded across the hallway in socks and knocked on her door. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. Then pressed my ear to it. I thought I heard a click. Like a door latch. But not from her apartment. It sounded like it came from downstairs. That's when I noticed something else. My doormat, the one that says "Nah, not you," was gone. Just a blank spot where it had been, and some muddy prints on the floor tiles. That didn't make sense. No one else's doormat was missing. Just mine. I rushed back into my apartment, locked the door, and pushed the little deadbolt into place. I even dragged a chair in front of it like some flimsy barricade. Then I checked every closet and under every bed and behind the shower curtain. I knew it wouldn't help if someone was really inside, but I had to do it anyway. There was nothing. Finally, I pulled the blinds back up just a few inches and looked outside. The street was empty. No cars. No people. No wind. Just the glow of a single streetlight down the block. It almost looked like a set, like one of those fake neighborhoods for filming shows. Then I saw movement. Not near me. Way down the street. A figure was walking away. Not fast, not slow. Just steady. I couldn't tell anything about them, what they were wearing, how tall, nothing. Just that they weren't in a rush. Like they had all the time in the world. That was somehow worse than if they'd been running. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light on and sat with my back to the wall, knife in my lap, staring at the window. Eventually, my phone service came back. I didn't even notice at first. The first thing that came through was a reply from Elise. Sorry. Was in the bath. Everything okay? I said no. I told her everything. She came over with her boyfriend, and we triple-checked the place. She offered to let me stay with them, but I said no. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to be away in case someone came back. I moved a couple months later. Not because of that night, or at least, that's what I told people. I said rent went up, or the heater was broken. But that's not why. The weirdest part was when I was packing, I found the doormat, folded up and stuffed under my bed. I know I didn't put it there. And I know it hadn't been there the night I checked. I was driving cross-country for work, from Denver to a job site in Southern California. It wasn't anything exciting, just another consulting gig I didn't really care about. I left later than I should have, and by the time I hit the California border, it was already pushing midnight. I figured I'd grab a room somewhere before the last stretch in the morning. I didn't want to pay for anything fancy, just a place to crash for a few hours. I got off the highway near a little town that barely looked alive, one gas station, a diner, and 2 motels. I picked the cheaper looking one. It was one of those long, single-level buildings where all the doors faced the parking lot. The lobby was this sad little room with cracked tile floors and a buzzing soda machine that sounded like it was dying. The guy behind the counter looked like he was about to fall asleep in his chair, but he perked up when I walked in. His name tag said Al, and he had that kind of look where you couldn't tell if he was 60 or 80. I paid in cash, just to be quick, and he handed me a real key, like, not a card, but an actual metal key on a plastic tag. Room 6. The place was quiet. Just a couple of trucks and an old sedan parked out front. I backed into the space outside my room, grabbed my backpack, and let myself in. The room wasn't great. The air smelled a little stale, the sheets were thin, and the lamp on the nightstand flickered a bit when I turned it on. But the door locked fine, the deadbolt worked, and the AC kicked on with a loud groan. That was all I needed. I showered fast, set an alarm for 6 a.m., and climbed into bed. It was dead quiet outside, no cars, no people, just the low hum of the AC and the occasional click from the fridge. Around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up to a sound. Not a crash or anything loud, just this soft metallic jingling. Like keys. At first I thought it was part of a dream, but it kept going. Then I heard footsteps, real slow, crunching on gravel right outside the door. I stayed perfectly still, just listening. The jingling got closer. Then it stopped. A second later, someone tried the doorknob. Not just a jiggle, like a full turn. Slow. Deliberate. My heart jumped up into my throat. I sat up in bed and stared at the door. The deadbolt was still locked. I remember that clearly because I checked it twice before going to sleep. The knob turned again. I heard the faintest clink of metal hitting the door frame, like someone trying to use a key that didn't quite fit. Then a voice. "Hey," a man said, muffled through the door. "This is my room." I didn't say anything. I just kept staring. The voice was calm. Too calm. Not confused or angry, just flat. A pause. Then more jingling. Another attempt at the lock. "I think you're in the wrong room," he said. Not loud, not yelling, just speaking like he was sure of it. I got up slowly and reached for my phone. No signal. I moved toward the window, careful not to step too loud. The blinds were closed, but I peeked through a gap. There was a guy standing right there. Early 40s, maybe. Clean jeans, dark hoodie, hands at his sides. No bags, no car keys, nothing in his hands. He wasn't looking around like someone genuinely confused. He was just staring at the door. He didn't knock. Didn't raise his voice. Just stood there. I backed away, heart hammering. The guy tried the knob again. Then he knocked just once. A soft, hollow thud. I whispered, "Get out of here," but didn't know if he heard me. He waited, then walked off. I watched his shadow move under the bottom of the door as he went down the sidewalk. But I didn't hear a car start. I didn't hear a door open. Just silence. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, watching the people, listening. Nothing. I considered calling the front desk, but I hadn't seen a phone in the room. I looked again, nothing by the bed or desk. My cell still had no service. Eventually, I grabbed a chair from the desk and shoved it under the doorknob. It wouldn't stop anyone serious, but it made me feel better. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in bed, fully dressed, watching the door and checking the time every few minutes. My eyes burned from staring at the peephole. Still no movement. At 5:30, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed up, cracked the door open just enough to look around. The lot was empty except for my car. I hurried out and slammed the door behind me, tossing my bag into the front seat. As I drove past the office, I noticed something weird. The lobby lights were off. The door was locked. No sign of Al. The open sign wasn't even lit. It was like nobody had been there all night. Back on the highway, I finally got service again. I called the motel number from the receipt. A woman answered. I asked for Al. "There's no Al here," she said. "You mean Alan? He works days, but he's out this week." I asked if anyone else worked nights. "Nope. We don't have a night shift. The office closes at 10. I didn't know what to say. I hung up. Later, I checked the receipt again. No last name, no logo, just motel and a phone number. I Googled the place. The building matched, but the photos looked a lot cleaner than what I saw. The weirdest part? Room 6 was listed as under renovation. Not available for guests. I don't know who gave me that key, or who the guy at the door was, or why he had one, too. It was around 10:30 at night. I was in the living room with the TV on low, not really watching anything, just kinda zoning out after a long day. The lights were off except for a little lamp in the corner. I live alone in a one-story house, kind of tucked away at the end of a short dead-end road. Quiet neighborhood. Not much traffic, especially that late. I heard the sound of tires crunching over gravel and slowed down outside. Not speeding, not rolling through, just easing and real careful. I didn't think much of it at first. Could have been a neighbor's friend turning around, maybe. Happens sometimes. But the engine didn't keep moving. It idled. After a few seconds, I muted the TV. I leaned a little to the side on the couch and peeked out the front window. There was a white van sitting in my driveway. Plain. No logo or anything. Just white, kind of dingy. One headlight was a little dimmer than the other. I waited, expecting someone to get out or maybe just reverse and leave, but nothing happened. The engine just sat there, humming. Then the passenger door opened, and a guy stepped out. He looked like he could have been a delivery driver, I guess. Maybe late 30s, dark hair, hoodie, ball cap. He had a smallish box in one hand, nothing big. He stood there for a second, like he was double-checking the address on the side of the house. But I hadn't ordered anything. I was sure of it. I got up and walked quietly to the door. I didn't open it, just looked through the peephole. He was walking up the steps to my porch, slow and casual, like he did this every day. He set the box down right in front of the door and then knocked. Just once. Not super hard, but enough to be heard. I didn't say anything. After maybe 5 seconds, he knocked again. A little louder. I called out through the door. "Who is it?" He paused, then said, "Delivery." "For what?" "Got a package here for you." "From who?" He didn't answer right away. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the brim of the hat through the peephole, angled slightly down. Then he said, "I just deliver 'em." I didn't open the door. I kept looking at him, trying to get a read. He wasn't wearing any company logo. Not Amazon, not FedEx, nothing. Even the box was plain brown. No tape, no label that I could see from that angle. I said, "I didn't order anything." He shrugged. "It's got your address." "Let me see it." He didn't move for a second. Then he bent down, turned the box slightly so it faced the door, but it was too dark to read anything through the peephole. I said, "What company are you with?" He didn't answer. Just stood there. Then he leaned forward a little and said, "You gonna open the door or not?" I backed away from the door and didn't say anything. Just stood there. After a few seconds, he knocked again. This time, 3 times, slower, heavier. Then he said, quieter, "Come on, man. Don't make this weird." That was enough for me. I went to the kitchen and grabbed my phone, pulled up the security cam app. I only had one camera mounted on the front porch. It didn't have audio, just a wide-angle view, but it was night vision equipped. I loaded it up. The guy was still standing there, facing the door, kind of rocking on his heels. I took a screenshot and texted it to my buddy Josh, just in case. Didn't explain much, just said, "You recognize this guy?" and added, "Some delivery BS at my place RN." Then I went back to the door. I still didn't open it. Just said, "You need to leave. Now." He didn't move. I'm not opening this door. Finally, he turned and walked off the porch. I heard his steps go down, then back toward the van. I waited until I heard the driver door open and shut. The engine was still on. I went to the side window to watch. He wasn't pulling out. He just sat there. I texted Josh again. He's not leaving. Josh replied fast, "Call the cops." I didn't want to jump to that unless it got worse. but I was thinking about it. I kept watching the van. 10 minutes passed. Still no movement. Then the headlights cut off. I froze. The engine was still going, but now it was just sitting dark at the edge of my driveway. That's when I called 911. I told them everything. The guy's clothes, the box, the van, how he wasn't answering questions, how he hadn't left. They said they'd send a unit out. I kept watching the van. I didn't see the door open again, but I couldn't be sure. No dome light came on. No movement. Maybe 10 minutes later, 2 sets of headlights came down the road. One was a cruiser, the other an unmarked SUV. They pulled in slow. Soon as their lights hit the van, the driver door opened and the guy got out fast. He tried to walk up to the officers like it was nothing. They talked for a few minutes. I couldn't hear anything from inside. One of the cops walked up to my porch. I opened the door just a crack and kept the chain on. He asked me if I knew the guy. I said absolutely not. He asked if I was expecting a delivery. I told him again, no. He asked if the guy had said anything else. I mentioned the weird "don't make it weird" line. That got him to frown. I asked what was in the box. He looked back at his partner, then said it was empty. They talked with the guy a while longer. Eventually, they cuffed him. One of the officers came back and said they were detaining him for trespassing and possibly impersonating a delivery driver, but he wasn't making much sense. They were going to take him in for questioning. The van got towed. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. After they left, I stood on my porch for a bit just looking at where the van had been. The box was still there. They said it was harmless, but I still didn't want it in my house. I left it there until morning and then tossed it in a dumpster a few blocks away. Josh came over the next day and said the guy didn't look familiar. I asked around the neighbors too. Nobody had seen the van before. A few weeks later, I called the department to follow up. They said the guy had no ID, gave them a fake name, and eventually got transferred to a psych facility. Wouldn't say anything about why he was there or what he wanted. Just kept saying he had a delivery to make. Over and over. I upgraded my cameras after that. Added 2 more, plus a motion light. Haven't seen that van again. But I still check the feed every night before bed. Just in case. I was driving home from work one night, around 9:30 p.m., just like any other weekday. The streets were quiet, and I was stopped at a red light on Main Street. As I waited, I noticed a pedestrian on the sidewalk, standing still and looking directly at me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just waiting to cross. But then, he mouthed my full name. Not just my first name, but my full name. I was taken aback. I had never seen this person before in my life. He didn't look familiar at all. Before I could react, the light turned green, and he walked off into the darkness. I drove home, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he was talking to someone else. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the incident in my head. How did he know my name? Why did he look at me like that? I decided to check my social media accounts, thinking maybe someone had posted something about me, or maybe my information was more public than I thought. But everything seemed normal. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. I started noticing the same car parked near my house at odd hours. I would see the same person at the grocery store, always a few miles away. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One evening, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with the words, "We know who you are." That was it. No explanation, no signature. I reported it to the police, but without any concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I changed my routines, took different routes to work, and even stayed with a friend for a few days. Eventually, the sightings stopped, and the strange occurrences ceased. But the memory of that night at the red light still lingers. I never found out who that person was or how they knew my name, but it served as a chilling reminder of how vulnerable we can be, even in the most mundane moments of our lives. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the second floor of an older building. Nothing fancy. The kind of place with thin walls, weird plumbing noises, and doors that never quite lined up with the frames. I'd been there a couple years, and besides a few noisy neighbors and the occasional drunk yelling out front, it was pretty quiet. It happened on a Thursday night. I remember because I had work early Friday morning and went to bed around 10, which was early for me. I didn't drink anything that night. I wasn't on any meds. I hadn't watched anything scary. It was just a normal day. I was asleep, like fully out, when I heard the click. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. I woke up fast. Not groggy, not confused. Just instantly wide awake, heart already going. I didn't move at first. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out if I dreamed it. Then I heard it again, softer this time. A tiny creak, like weight shifting on the floor. The layout of the apartment was simple. My bedroom was at the back, down a short hallway. The front door opened right into the living room. I didn't have a dog, no roommates, no one with a key. I sat up slowly, real slow, and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. No messages, no missed calls. The clock said 2:11 a.m. I stayed in bed for a minute, just listening. My building's not the kind where you hear people walking in the halls unless they're right outside your door. But I didn't hear anything like that. No footsteps coming from the hallway. Just this weird silence. Not peaceful, but heavy. Eventually, I got up and walked to the door of my bedroom. I didn't turn the lights on. I just cracked the door and looked down the hall. I couldn't see much. There was just enough light from the street coming through the blinds in the living room to make out vague shapes. The couch. The coat rack. Nothing looked out of place. But it felt wrong. Like someone had breathed in all the air. I don't know what made me do it, but I opened the hallway closet and grabbed my old aluminum baseball bat. I hadn't used it since high school. Just kept it around because I figured it might come in handy one day. I walked slow, bare feet on the carpet, bat in one hand, phone in the other. I didn't even think to call 911 yet. I guess I was still trying to convince myself it wasn't real. When I reached the living room, I stopped just inside the entryway. The front door was shut. Locked, even. I stepped closer and checked the deadbolt. It was unlocked. That door has two locks, the deadbolt up top and the handle lock below. I always lock both before bed. Always. I didn't even think about it anymore. It was muscle memory. The handle was still locked. The deadbolt was turned. I stood there for I don't know how long, just staring at the lock. Then I slowly turned around and checked every window. all shut. Nothing looked tampered with. The blinds were all down. No one outside. I finally called the cops. Not 911, just a non-emergency number. I told them I thought someone might have gotten into my apartment. I didn't say it with much confidence. I think part of me was embarrassed, like maybe I was overreacting. An officer came about 20 minutes later. She checked the place with me. Every closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. She asked if anything was missing. It wasn't. Everything was exactly how I'd left it. She was nice about it, but I could tell she thought I was just nervous or paranoid. She gave me a number to call if anything else happened and left. I didn't go back to sleep. I just sat on the couch with the bat across my lap until the sun came up. The next day I bought a door jammer. One of those bars that braces under the doorknob. I also ordered a little camera for the living room. Nothing fancy, just one that connects to your phone and sends alerts if it sees movement. I installed it that night and tested it a few times. It worked. Nothing happened for about a week. I started to feel dumb about the whole thing. I figured maybe I had forgotten to lock the deadbolt after all. I mean, I didn't think I did, but I also didn't have proof. Then, a little after 3 a.m. the following Thursday, my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. I was already awake, couldn't sleep much anymore, and the buzz nearly made me drop the phone. I opened the app and saw the camera feed. There was a guy standing in the living room. Not moving. Not doing anything. Just standing near the couch, facing the hallway. I froze. I couldn't think. The only reason I didn't call the cops right then was because the image didn't change. At all. He didn't blink, didn't shift, nothing. Then I realized the camera wasn't live. It had taken a snapshot. Just one image. It hadn't captured a video, which meant he was there for only a second or the motion sensor barely caught him. I ran into the hallway with the bat, yelling. I didn't even know what I planned to do. The front door was locked, both locks this time. The windows were still shut. But he was gone. I called the cops. This time I didn't care how I sounded. They came out with 2 officers and actually took it seriously. They asked to see the camera, took a copy of the image, looked around again. Still nothing. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing. I showed them the door jammer too, which was still wedged under the handle. If he'd come through the door, he would have had to remove that and then put it back. And I didn't hear a thing. They didn't have any real answers. One of the officers suggested I might have left a window unlocked without realizing, but he couldn't explain how the door jammer was untouched. I stayed at a friend's place the next few nights. I didn't feel safe going back, but I couldn't afford to move right away either. Eventually I had to go back for work and stuff. That's when I noticed something else. The camera app? It stores activity logs. I hadn't really checked them before, but I started scrolling through the past few weeks. There were gaps. Days where I was home and should have triggered it at least once, but nothing recorded. Then there were entries from times I wasn't home. Little bursts of motion from the living room. Nothing captured, just a log. I don't know how long it had been happening. That weekend I packed up and moved out. I crashed with a friend for a while, then found a new place on the other side of town. Different building, different locks, second floor again, but with a balcony this time. I still have that camera. And the bat. And I haven't used the deadbolt only once since. It started on a Tuesday night. I remember because I was dragging the trash bins out to the curb and the neighbor's dog was barking like crazy, nothing unusual. But then I noticed the car. Parked across the street, engine running, no lights on. Just sitting there. I figured maybe it was a DoorDash guy or someone waiting to pick up a friend. I didn't think much of it. Took the bins out, walked back inside, locked the door behind me. The next night, same thing. Same car, black sedan, older model, looked a little beat up but not enough to stand out. It was parked in the exact same spot, across the street from my place, about halfway under the streetlight. Windows tinted. Engine running again. This time, I paused on the porch a second longer, just kind of watching. I couldn't see anyone clearly inside, but I could make out the faint glow of a phone screen. As soon as I stepped off the porch, like I was going to cross the street, the car pulled away. Not fast, but smooth and steady. Like it didn't want to draw attention. By the third night, I was watching for it. It showed up around the same time, 9:30 or so. Just parked and sat there. This time I didn't go outside. I turned off the living room light and stood behind the curtain, watching. I thought about taking a picture, but it felt dumb, like, what was I even gonna say? Look, a car parked legally on a public street. Still, something about it bothered me. It didn't feel random. The way it left when I moved toward it made it seem like they were watching me, not just hanging out. I told myself I was being paranoid. Night 4, same thing. Now I was keeping the front lights off on purpose. I sat on the couch with the TV on mute, just staring through the gap in the curtain. I couldn't make out a face, but I swear I saw the shape of a head turned toward my house. I finally told someone on night 5, my friend Josh. I sent him a text like, hey, not to be dramatic, but there's been this car sitting outside my place every night this week. Real weird vibes. He called me right away. He asked if I wanted him to come over, but I said no. I was kind of half hoping I was imagining things, and if someone else saw it too, that'd make it real. I did ask him to drive by my street around 9:30 the next night and just see if the car was there. Night 6, the car showed up again. But this time, Josh was already parked around the corner. I texted him as soon as I saw it, and a few minutes later, he turned onto my street from the opposite end. The second his headlights hit the black sedan, it started rolling away, didn't speed off, just eased off like it had somewhere to be. Josh followed it for a couple blocks but lost it when it turned and didn't signal. He came back and knocked on my door. He looked spooked. Said he couldn't get a license plate because there was mud all over it, like someone smeared it on purpose. That's when it stopped feeling like a coincidence and started feeling like something worse. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? A car's been parking across the street and leaving when I notice it? Not exactly a crime. Still, I wrote down the make and model as best I could. Mid-2000s black Nissan, maybe an Ultima. Night 7, I didn't sleep. I kept all the lights off and stayed by the window again. The car came later this time, closer to 10. Sat there longer too, almost 40 minutes. I finally opened the door and stepped out onto the porch again, phone in hand. The second I started walking toward the street, it peeled away faster than before. Not reckless, but definitely not trying to stay unnoticed anymore. That was enough. I took the next day off work and bought a cheap outdoor security camera. Mounted it over the garage and aimed it at the street. It had motion alerts and everything, connected to my phone. Night 8, the car didn't show up. Night 9, it didn't show up either. I started wondering if maybe I'd scared them off. Maybe they figured I was onto them. Still, I left the camera on and kept the front light off just in case. Then on the 10th night, Around 2:15 in the morning, I got a motion alert on my phone. I was already awake, scrolling Reddit in bed. I opened the app and checked the clip. There was no car. It was a person. They walked up from the left side of the frame, real slow. Hoodie pulled up, couldn't see their face. They didn't come to the front door, they just stood across the street, directly where the car used to park. They stayed there for 3 minutes, just standing and facing the house. Then they turned and walked off. I saved the clip and sent it to Josh. He called me right away again. I didn't answer, I was too busy moving a chair in front of the door. The next day, I filed a report. The cop I talked to was nice enough, but said unless they actually trespassed or threatened me, there wasn't much they could do. He suggested leaving lights on and maybe staying somewhere else for a while. I didn't have anywhere to go that night, so I just double-checked all the locks and brought a baseball bat into the bedroom. Around 3 a.m., I heard something tap against my front window. Just once. I froze. It didn't happen again. I stayed completely still, holding my breath, straining to hear any footsteps or sounds outside. Nothing. I didn't check. I just sat there until it got light out. The next day I called out sick again and installed another camera, this time aimed directly at the front door and window. I also moved a chair against the back door and left a light on in every room. I even taped a note to the window that said, "Smile, you're on camera just in case." That night, nothing happened. Same with the night after that. I started to relax again. Then, the morning of day 13, I woke up to find a folded note stuck between my screen door and the front door. Just plain white paper, no envelope. All it said was, "You're smart to stay inside." I didn't go to work. I didn't even open the door. I called the cops again, and this time they sent someone out. The officer looked at the cameras and the note. He said he patrolled the area that night and took a copy of the video and the paper. That night, no one showed up. Same for the night after that. I haven't seen the car since. But I bought blackout curtains, a deadbolt for my bedroom door, and a second lock for the back one. I still check the cameras every night. I still don't go outside after dark. And even though it's been months now, I still catch myself staring out the window after dinner, waiting to see that black car again. I don't even know where to start with this. It was one of those things where, at first, you're like, okay, that's odd, but it's probably nothing. But then, as it goes on, you start realizing something's not right. And you're not sure how to explain it, but you feel it. You just feel it. So it all started about a month ago. I'd been wanting this jacket for weeks. A simple, black bomber jacket. Nothing fancy, but I liked it, and I finally had the cash to pick it up. I got it from a store downtown after work. Didn't think twice about it. Put it in the back seat of my car, drove home, and tossed it on my bed. No big deal. It was just a jacket. The next morning, I woke up and decided to wear it. It fit perfectly, looked just how I imagined it would. I drove to work, feeling good about the purchase. Everything was normal. Just another Monday, right? But when I left work that evening, something was off. I don't know how to explain it exactly. You know that feeling when someone's staring at you? You get that prickling on the back of your neck. Well, that's what I felt when I got to my car. As I walked toward it, I saw a piece of paper stuck under the windshield wiper. My first thought was, great, a parking ticket, but then I noticed it wasn't an envelope or anything official. Just a plain scrap of paper. I pulled it out, and it was a note. It said, "Nice jacket." I stood there for a second, confused. I mean, I just bought that jacket that morning, and I hadn't worn it anywhere except work. Nobody could have known about it unless they saw me at the store or something, but even then, how would they have had time to follow me? I thought maybe someone was just messing around. I mean, it wasn't threatening or anything. It wasn't even weird, exactly. Just odd. But I brushed it off. Maybe it was a coincidence. The next day, I wore the jacket again. No reason not to, right? It was cold, and it looked good, so why not? I went through my day like usual. No weird vibes, nothing out of the ordinary. But when I came out of work that evening, there it was again. Another note. This time, it was folded neatly and tucked under the wiper, like whoever left it had made sure to make it look deliberate. I unfolded it, and it read, "Looking good in that jacket." I felt a weird twinge in my stomach. Again, no threats, no creepy wording. Just a weird comment about my jacket. But it didn't sit right with me. It was too much of a coincidence. Who was watching me? Who had noticed my jacket enough to leave 2 notes in a row? I checked my surroundings before getting in the car. Nothing out of place. No one loitering. I thought maybe I was just overthinking it. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. It was like someone was following me, but I never saw anyone. By Thursday, I had enough. I decided not to wear the jacket. I put on something else and went about my day. I figured if I didn't wear it, the notes would stop. It was stupid to even think about it, I told myself. But I wasn't prepared for what happened when I got to my car that evening. When I walked to it, I noticed the note immediately. Same spot under the windshield wiper. I pulled it out, heart pounding in my chest, because this time, the note was different. It wasn't just about the jacket. It said, "I've been watching you for days. Don't wear it tomorrow." I froze. I stared at the note for what felt like forever. My mind raced. How the hell could anyone know I'd been wearing that jacket? How could they have been watching me? I hadn't told anyone about the notes. I hadn't even told my friends or family. So how did someone know? I drove straight home, barely remembering the trip, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I locked myself in my apartment that night, double-checked the deadbolts on every door, and turned on the outside lights. I couldn't explain why I was so rattled, but I knew something wasn't right. The next day, I didn't go to work. I called in sick. I stayed inside, pacing, looking out the windows every few minutes, half expecting to see someone standing across the street, just waiting. It was a long, long day. The following morning, I finally had the courage to go outside. I figured I'd been overreacting. Maybe I was just imagining things. But when I stepped out of my apartment, I couldn't help myself. I checked my car again. I had to. And there it was, right where I'd left it, parked on the street. I walked over slowly, hoping, praying that there wouldn't be another note. But there was. This time, it was written in a shaky hand, as if whoever wrote it was in a rush. It said, "I see you're still wearing it. Don't make me come closer." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. That was the point I called the police. I showed them the notes and explained everything. They were sympathetic but didn't seem overly concerned. They told me to be careful and keep an eye on my surroundings. They said they couldn't do anything unless I was actually being threatened, but if anything happened, to call them immediately. The next few days were a blur. I stayed home as much as I could, and whenever I had to go out, I kept my head down, trying to avoid anyone noticing me. I didn't want to be seen wearing the jacket, but at the same time, I was afraid to not wear it. I felt like someone would be watching either way. I never got another note. But the strangest thing happened about a week after that. I was walking down the street when I saw someone wearing the same jacket. Same black bomber. It was a guy I'd never seen before, just standing outside a store, smoking a cigarette. He looked right at me, and for a moment, I thought he might say something, but he just turned away and went inside. I haven't worn that jacket since. I'm not sure if I ever will. The note stopped, but the unease didn't go away. I still feel like someone's watching me sometimes, especially when I'm near my car. I've been more careful about what I wear now. I keep my head down, try to stay under the radar. But every now and then, I'll catch a glimpse of someone in the corner of my eye, and I'll wonder if it's the person who was watching me. If it's the person who left those notes. And I can't shake the thought that they might still be out there. I was freelancing at the time, doing marketing work, mostly writing social posts and email campaigns for small companies. I couldn't really afford a private office, so I got a membership at this co-working space downtown. It was one of those 24/7 ones where you swipe in with a key card. Nothing fancy, just rows of desks, coffee machine, a kitchen that always smelled like microwave popcorn, and a bunch of freelancers with headphones on pretending not to be broke. Most nights I worked late. I did my best thinking when no one was around, so I'd usually show up around 7 p.m. and stay until maybe midnight or later. The place cleared out by 8 most nights, except for a few people. One of them was this guy. I never caught his name. That's kind of the whole thing, I guess. I noticed him maybe 2 weeks in. He always came in around 9. Tall, maybe late 40s, glasses, button-down shirt. Looked like someone's quiet uncle. He'd sit 2 tables across from me, near the far window. Never brought a laptop. Just sat there. At first I figured he was taking a break or waiting for someone. But then he kept showing up. Same time, same seat. Never spoke. Never even looked around. He'd just sit with his hands folded or resting on his knees. No phone. No book. Just still. I thought maybe he was meditating or something, but who does that in a shared workspace? And for hours? I remember one night I stayed till 1 a.m., and he was still there when I left. Just sitting. It bugged me, but not in a huge way at first. I just made a mental note. Weird guy, probably harmless. People do weird stuff. The city's full of weirdos, right? But one night, maybe a Thursday, I was microwaving leftover pad thai in the kitchen, and I looked through the glass door into the main space. He was already there. Sitting, as usual. But this time, his head was turned slightly toward me. I stood there, holding my plastic container, watching him through the door. His eyes didn't move. His face didn't change. He was just watching. I felt something crawl up my neck, like a static charge. When I came back out, he turned his head back forward. I sat down at my desk and tried to get into work, but I kept glancing over. He didn't budge. For hours. The next couple nights, I avoided eye contact. I didn't want to feed into anything, and I didn't want to seem paranoid. But once you notice someone doing something that doesn't quite fit, it's like your brain can't stop tracking it. It's like a sensor that keeps pinging. Friday night, I stayed later than usual. I was trying to finish a campaign deck, and I didn't want to work through the weekend. Around 10:30, I realized I was the only one left. No hum of other laptops, no chairs creaking, just the buzz of the ceiling lights and the quiet clack of my keys. I glanced up and froze. He wasn't at his usual table. He was closer. One table away. Same posture. Same direction. Closer. I didn't hear him move. The place was so quiet, I would have heard footsteps. But there he was, just one table between us. I stared at my screen for a few seconds, not typing. I could feel heat rising in my face. I told myself I was being dramatic, that maybe someone had sat there earlier and he'd just taken the open spot. But I hadn't seen anyone else in hours. I packed up quicker than usual and left. I didn't run or anything, just walked briskly, told myself I needed to catch the train. As I swiped my key card at the exit door, I looked back. He hadn't moved. Saturday I didn't go in. I needed a break anyway. Sunday, same thing. I told myself I'd only go during the day from now on. Enough of the late night shifts. Monday, I came in around noon. There were plenty of people, some meetings going on in the classrooms, someone doing a Zoom call without headphones, as usual. I felt better. Until I saw him. Same guy. Same button down. Sitting at the far end, just past the printers. No laptop, no phone. Just sitting. He hadn't been there when I walked in. I was sure of it. It was like he showed up after I sat down, like he was waiting. Or watching. I stayed for less than an hour, then packed up and went to a cafe instead. That night, I emailed the building manager. I kept it vague. Said there was a man who made me uncomfortable, didn't accuse him of anything, just asked if maybe they could check the security cams or something. I got a polite reply the next morning. We'll look into it. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I didn't go back that week. The next Monday, I gave it another shot. It was late again. I needed the quiet. Around 8 p.m., the place was almost empty. I walked the whole floor before I sat down. No sign of him. I sat up at a table closer to the door. Just in case. Worked for an hour or so, then went to the kitchen for water. When I came back out, he was there. Not across from me. Not by the window. He was sitting in my seat. Same posture. Same direction. Staring at my screen. I froze in the doorway. It didn't make sense. I hadn't even been gone 2 minutes. I hadn't heard the door. My laptop was still open, my bag still next to the chair. I backed into the hallway and left. Didn't even grab my stuff. I walked straight out and called my friend Dana, who lived 10 minutes away. Slept on her couch that night. Next morning, I came back with her to get my things. Broad daylight, full office, people everywhere. My laptop was still there, untouched. Nothing stolen. No sign of the guy. I asked the front desk if they'd seen him. The girl there looked confused. Do you mean Robert? He comes in sometimes, usually at night. Robert, I said. He works here? She hesitated. Not really. He doesn't have a membership. He used to, years ago. But his access expired. Then how's he getting in? She didn't answer at first. Just kind of blinked. We flagged it. Management's working on it. That night, I moved all my files to the cloud and canceled my membership. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. Not in the building. Not even downtown. I was in a coffee shop uptown, laptop open, trying to finish a client project. The place was packed. I was facing the window, and across the street, half behind a bus stop, was a man standing completely still. He wasn't watching me directly, but he was facing my window, like he was waiting. I closed my laptop and left out the side door. Took the long way home. Checked behind me every block. I never saw him again after that, but I still keep my screen facing the wall wherever I work, just in case. I usually ran early in the morning, before work. Not because I was some big fitness person or anything, but I liked the quiet. No traffic, no people. Just birds and air and space to think. There's a trail that loops around a wooded area behind my apartment complex. It's not big, maybe a mile and a half, but it's clean and tucked away. I'd run it almost every day for a year. That morning was like any other. I left just after 6. It was still kind of dark, but the sky was turning blue. I had my hoodie on, headphones in, same route I always took. I didn't notice anything weird at first. About halfway through the loop, the trail dips down a bit and cuts through this thicker patch of trees. That part always gave me the creeps a little, just because it's quiet and there's no houses close by. As I rounded the curve, I noticed something stuck to a tree up ahead. Looked like paper at first. I thought maybe a flyer or a lost dog sign or something. When I got closer, I realized it was a photo. It was printed on cheap paper, like from a home printer. Just taped up at eye level. The picture was of me. It took me a second to process. It wasn't from the run, it was earlier that morning. I was in the parking lot of my building, stretching next to my car. Same hoodie, same leggings, same shoes. I took out my headphones and looked around. The trail was empty. No people, no cars on the road behind the trees. Just the wind and some birds. I tried to tell myself it was a prank. Maybe someone messing around. Maybe I was overthinking it. I pulled the photo down and kept walking. About 20 feet later, there was another one. Same kind of photo, printed on regular paper, taped to the trunk. This time it was me jogging out of the complex entrance, just past the sidewalk. I pulled that one down too. My heart was starting to thump now, not from the run. I looked around again. Still no one. I walked slowly now, scanning the trees. There was a third one, just a few steps ahead. It showed me standing at the edge of the trail where I always pause to start my fitness app. Whoever took these had followed me. That morning, I turned around and started walking back the way I came, but then I stopped. There were more photos taped in that direction too. I hadn't noticed them when I first passed. Whoever did this must have come right after me. Maybe even while I was still running. My chest felt tight. I didn't know what to do. The trail had 2 exits, one led back toward my apartment, the other looped around to a street that connected to the main road. I didn't want to go back the way I came, so I kept moving forward. I took off the hoodie and wrapped it around my waist. I don't know why. I guess it felt like something he'd be looking for. I started jogging again, faster now. Every few trees, there was another photo. Me waiting at the crosswalk. Me jogging past the old gas station at the corner. There were no pictures from the trail itself. Just the walk from my apartment to the entrance. Which meant whoever it was had gotten ahead of me somehow. Or they knew the trail well enough to cut through. I passed one photo that was different, not me running. It was a picture of my back as I stretched at the trail entrance. Whoever took it had been standing behind me, I couldn't hear anything but my own breathing and my shoes hitting the dirt. The trail curved again and opened up near the edge of a neighborhood. I ran up the small hill and finally saw the break in the trees where the path met the sidewalk. I didn't look back. I just ran. I followed the road until I hit the 7-Eleven a few blocks down. I went inside and called a rideshare to take me home. The cashier asked if I was okay. I lied and said I felt faint. When I got home, I called the police. An officer came out and walked the trail with me. The photos were gone. Not just the ones I hadn't taken down, all of them. I showed him the two I still had, the first and second ones. He said they couldn't do much unless someone was actually caught in the act. They said I should avoid the trail for a while. So I stopped running. I changed my routine, started going to a gym after work instead. For a few weeks, nothing happened. Then, one Saturday, I got a manila envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside were about 10 photos. All printed the same way. All of me. From different days, different outfits. Coming out of my apartment. Walking to my car. At the grocery store. None of them recent. But all of them taken without me noticing. I moved out of that apartment 3 months later. New place. Different side of town. No trails nearby. I still run, but only in daylight. Always at the gym. And I never, ever wore the same outfit twice in a week. It started with the mail. Well, actually, it started earlier than that, but it all came to a head with the mail. I'd been living alone for about a year at that point. Nothing too unusual in my life, just the usual routine, work, gym, occasional nights out with friends, and weekends spent doing house chores or watching whatever series I was into at the time. My place was a 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of an old building. Nothing fancy, but it was quiet, tucked away in a corner of the city, and I liked that. It was my space, and I enjoyed the peace. But one day, I found an envelope in the mailbox that changed everything. The envelope itself wasn't anything out of the ordinary at first glance. It was just a plain white envelope, no return address, no markings, just a stamp and my name written in neat, careful handwriting. I didn't think much of it, at least not at first. I opened it at my kitchen table, a cup of coffee beside me, expecting a bill or maybe some junk mail. But when I unfolded the piece of paper inside, I froze. There was a photo of my bedroom. And it wasn't just a random shot of the room. No, it was a picture taken from outside my window. You could see the window frame clearly in the shot, and I could tell from the angle that whoever took it had to be standing outside, looking directly at my room. What made my stomach drop wasn't just the photo, though it was the date printed at the bottom, taken last night. I sat there staring at the photo for what felt like forever. My bedroom looked normal, nothing out of place. The bed was made. My laptop was on the desk by the window, and the blinds were slightly drawn. But the thought that someone had been outside my window, watching me while I slept, made the air in the room feel thick. I couldn't shake the thought that I hadn't noticed anyone there. I would have heard something. Right? I wasn't one to panic easily, but that felt different. My gut told me this wasn't just some sick joke. The photo was too real. Too clear. Whoever had taken it had been close. Too close. I looked around the apartment. The blinds were drawn, the curtains shut tight. The place was secure, I thought. I double-checked everything, locked up tight every night. But now, I wasn't so sure. I walked around my apartment, checking every corner, looking out every window. Nothing was out of place. Still, I felt like I was being watched. Like someone was still there. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a mistake, a prank. But the longer I thought about it, the more I felt uneasy. I told myself I'd let it go for the night and figure it out in the morning. But sleep didn't come easy. I kept waking up, feeling like someone was outside, just waiting. It was the first time I truly felt uncomfortable in my own home. The next day, I called the police. I told them about the photo, trying to sound calm, but they were as confused as I was. They said there was nothing they could do unless I had more evidence, something to show I was being stalked or harassed. They advised me to take the photo to a local security expert, maybe get some cameras installed. But they didn't seem too concerned. No one was looking at me like I was in any real danger, just like a nuisance complaint. I wasn't about to just ignore it. That evening, I called a locksmith to install a deadbolt on the back door, just to be safe. I also set up a camera by my window. It wasn't state-of-the-art, but it was enough for me to at least have some peace of mind. The next few days were uneventful. I went about my business, still feeling uneasy, but no more photos came, and nothing else strange happened. I started to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe the whole thing had been a prank, and I was just looking into it too much. Then, about a week later, it happened again. Another envelope. Same plain white envelope, no return address. Same neat handwriting. Same feeling of dread creeping up on me as I opened it. This time, there was no photo. There was just a note. You're not as careful as you think. The back door was unlocked last night. My heart stopped when I read that. The back door. I knew for a fact I had locked it before going to bed. I always did. I was meticulous about security, especially after the first photo. I checked the door, double-checked it every night. But this note, it was like they knew. It felt like they were right there, watching me as I read it. I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling the police again, but what would I say? Hey, someone knows I forgot to lock my back door last night, and I don't know who they are. I already felt foolish, but now it was getting worse. Whoever this was getting bolder. And they weren't just watching from outside anymore. They knew things about my home that I couldn't explain. I spent the next couple of days obsessing over the note, over the fact that I'd let my guard down, even for a second. But nothing happened again. No more envelopes. No more strange messages. I installed cameras inside the house, checked every lock, and just stayed hyper-aware of everything. The tension in my chest didn't ease up, though. I wasn't going to pretend it had. I couldn't. A week passed, and then one night, while I was watching TV, I heard a knock at the door. My first thought was it was just a neighbor or someone I knew, but when I looked through the peephole, no one was standing there. I opened the door anyway, cautiously, and there was nothing. Just the cool air of the hallway outside. I stepped out into the corridor, looking up and down. Nothing. No one was there. But then, I saw it. On the ground, just in front of my door, was another envelope. I picked it up, my heart hammering in my chest. I could barely hold onto it. The handwriting was familiar. It was the same as the others. I tore it open, and this time, there was a photo again. This one was different, though. It was taken from inside my apartment. The shot was blurry, but I could make out the living room, and I could tell someone had been standing in the doorway, looking at me as I sat on the couch. I hadn't heard anyone come in. I hadn't seen anyone. The camera by the window hadn't picked up anything. But there, in the photo, was proof. Someone had been inside my apartment. I called the police again. They came, took the photo, and looked around, but they didn't seem to take it seriously. They said they'd put it on file, but I knew they weren't going to do much. No one seemed to think it was a big deal. But for me, it was everything. After that, I made sure to never be alone in the apartment again. I stayed with friends. I didn't go back until I felt like it was safe. But when I eventually did, everything was just quiet. Too quiet. I don't know who was doing this or what they wanted, but I haven't heard from them since that last photo. I still don't know what happened. I moved out of that apartment a few months later, and I haven't gotten another envelope. But I don't forget. Every time I hear a knock at the door, or even just a sound that's out of place, I freeze. I still look out the window to make sure no one's standing out there. I guess you never really know how much someone can be watching until it's too late. It was one of those days where everything felt a bit off, but you can't quite put your finger on why. I had just finished a long shift at work, and I was tired. It was around 11 p.m., and the parking garage I was walking through was practically empty. Just the low hum of the lights and the distant sound of a car engine starting somewhere on the far end of the lot. I'm used to working late, and I've been in that garage hundreds of times, so it's nothing new. There's this long stretch of concrete where the walls echo your footsteps, and I've always thought that was kind of eerie, but not in a serious way. It's just something you get used to. I was walking toward my car, keys in hand, my bag slung over my shoulder. The garage was a little colder than usual, which made the echo of my boots even more pronounced, like the sound was bouncing off the walls in a way that felt too loud for how empty the place was. I had about 100 feet left to go, and I started to hear it. The sound of footsteps, matching my own. Not too fast, not too slow, just perfectly in sync with mine. I could hear the echo of them coming from behind me, getting closer. At first, I thought maybe someone else was in the garage too, but when I turned around, I didn't see anyone. The lights flickered a little, but that wasn't anything out of the ordinary either. The garage was always a little sketchy at night. I kept walking, brushing it off, trying to ignore the way the footsteps seemed to mirror mine. It felt like they were right behind me, but every time I glanced over my shoulder, there was no one there. It was the kind of thing that starts to mess with your mind. Like, maybe I was just imagining it, right? But then, when I stopped walking for a second, I heard it again. The footsteps. Only, they didn't stop when I did. They kept going. It was subtle at first, like a soft tap of a heel on concrete, and I thought maybe it was just an echo. But then it sounded like someone was actually walking past me. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear them clear as day, right behind me, and then they just kept going. I turned around quickly, heart starting to race. No one. The garage was empty. That's when I started to feel that creeping sense of unease. I'm not usually a paranoid person, but in that moment, it felt like someone was just out of sight, following me. I couldn't shake it. I took a few more steps, trying to be casual, but the footsteps followed. They were louder now, like they were matching my pace exactly, or maybe even speeding up a little. I glanced back again, and this time I swear I saw something in the shadows. Just for a second, nothing more than a shape, a movement, like someone stepping out of view just as I looked. I'm not sure what made me do it, but I picked up the pace. I wasn't trying to run, but I wasn't walking slow either. I didn't want to turn around, didn't want to look, but I could feel the footsteps getting faster behind me, like they were chasing me. And the thing was, I couldn't hear the sound of anyone breathing. There wasn't a sound from the person behind me. Just the tap of shoes on concrete, too close. My car was just ahead, but it felt like it was miles away. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I saw nothing, but I could hear those footsteps closing in. I don't even know why, but I glanced up at the security cameras mounted above. It was just out of habit, I think, because the camera on the corner of the garage caught my eye. But the strangest thing happened. I noticed something. The camera light was blinking. Not the usual red light that means it's on, but a quick, flickering pattern, like it was having trouble connecting. That shouldn't have been possible, because I knew the camera was supposed to be functioning. The garage was always well monitored, especially at night. But that blinking red light made my stomach twist. And then, just as I turned back to look ahead, I felt a cold draft hit the back of my neck. It wasn't just air from the ventilation. It was something else, like someone had just walked past me. I started to break into a fast walk, and the footsteps behind me started to pick up their pace again. Each time I slowed, they would slow down too, and when I sped up, they did the same. Like they were trying to stay in perfect rhythm with me. I felt the panic rising in my chest, but I didn't want to run. I didn't want to look like I was scared. When I finally reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. I heard one last set of footsteps right behind me. They stopped, just as I opened the door and slid inside. For a second, it was dead silent. I slammed the door shut, locking it immediately. I looked out the window, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. No one. I sat there for a minute, trying to calm myself down. But the weird thing was, I didn't see anyone leaving. No car starting. No footsteps retreating. The garage was just as empty as it had been when I first got there. I didn't want to leave right away, but I didn't want to sit there either. After what felt like forever, I started my car, and I drove out of the garage as quickly as I could. As I pulled out, I glanced into my rearview mirror. I half expected to see someone standing in the middle of the garage, staring at me. But there was nothing. Just the empty space. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing those footsteps in my mind, kept imagining the way they followed me quietly at first, then getting louder, until I felt like they were going to overtake me. I don't know if someone had been in the garage with me, or if it was all in my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The worst part? The next day when I went to work, the security footage was completely wiped out. They said it was a glitch. Just a technical issue. But they never found the source of the problem. Maybe it was nothing, but the fact that I could still hear those footsteps makes me think I wasn't imagining it. I first noticed something was off when my daughter, Lily, came home from school with a small plastic toy. It was just one of those cheap, colorful things you find in fast food Happy Meals, the kind of toy that gets tossed aside after a day or two. She'd never brought anything like that home before, and when I asked her where she got it, she just smiled and said, "From my new friend." At first, I didn't think much of it. Kids make friends at school all the time, right? It's probably some kid she'd met during recess or maybe someone in her class. I figured I'd ask her more about it later, but I was busy with dinner and getting my other two kids settled. So, I just nodded, said it was nice, and left it at that. The next day, though, she came home with more. A bag of gummy bears, some small crayons, and a little note that said, "For Lily. Have a great day. Your friend." There wasn't a name on the note, just a scribble in the corner that looked a little too neat for a child her age. Lily didn't say much about it except that my friend gave it to me, and again, I didn't think much of it. Kids do weird things sometimes. Maybe some other child was being kind, or maybe it was some odd school tradition I wasn't aware of. But then the gifts kept coming. Each day, Lily would come home with something new: a sticker sheet, a small notebook, a keychain, sometimes even a juice box. Each item would be accompanied by another note, written in the same perfect handwriting, with nothing more than a cheery, "I hope you like it. Your friend." By the third day, I started to get a little uncomfortable. Who was this friend? Why didn't they ever just hand Lily the gift at school? Why leave it in her backpack or in the pocket of her coat without ever meeting me or any of the other parents? And why didn't Lily ever mention anything more specific about this friend? It was always vague, like she didn't know anything about them, just that they were nice and wanted to give her gifts. I finally brought it up with Lily one night when I tucked her into bed. I asked her, "So, Lily, who's your new friend?" She just giggled. "I told you, Mom. My friend. They sit with me at lunch sometimes." I nodded, trying to keep my tone casual. "That's nice. What's their name?" Lily's eyes flickered for a second, like she was thinking hard. Then she shrugged. "I don't know. They don't tell me their name." That felt weird. I mean, I get it, kids sometimes don't know how to remember someone's name. But something about the way she said it made me uneasy. Almost like she didn't want to know their name. But again, I tried to brush it off. Kids are weird. Maybe this friend was shy. The next day, I decided to do something about it. I volunteered to pick Lily up from school. Normally, she rode the bus, but I thought it'd be good to catch a glimpse of her school, maybe meet some of the other kids. I waited outside the school gates, watching the kids stream out into the parking lot, hoping to spot her among the crowd. After a few minutes, I finally saw her, running toward me, grinning ear to ear. But as she got closer, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. She was holding another toy. This one was a stuffed animal, an ugly little bear that looked worn and dirty. It didn't seem like the type of thing a kid would buy, more like the kind of thing you'd find at a garage sale or in the bottom of a thrift store bin. "Where did you get that?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I intended. Lily didn't seem to notice. She just smiled, holding it up. "My friend gave it to me." I forced a smile. "That's nice. Did they give it to you today?" Lily's smile faltered for a second, and she looked down at the bear. No. They gave it to me yesterday, but I forgot to bring it home." I frowned. "But you didn't bring it up until now?" She nodded. "Yeah. It was in my cubby. I didn't push it. I just told her we'd talk more at home and let it go for the moment." But inside, my mind was racing. I had seen the way Lily acted. She wasn't lying, but it didn't make sense. Who was giving her all this stuff? Later that evening, when I was cleaning up after dinner, I checked her school bag. I don't know why I hadn't done it sooner, but I guess I had this nagging feeling in my gut. I pulled out her folder and started going through it. That's when I found another note. This one was different. It wasn't a cheerful, childish scribble. It was a clean, precise handwriting, like someone had taken their time to make sure it was neat. It said, "I miss you. Let's meet tomorrow. Your friend." My heart stopped. What did that even mean? Let's meet tomorrow? Why would this person want to meet my daughter outside of school? I wasn't sure what to think. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know how to stop it. The next day, I followed Lily to school. I stayed at the gate, out of sight, just far enough so she wouldn't see me, but close enough to watch what happened. She went inside, and I waited. I waited for what felt like hours. Finally, The bell rang, and the kids poured out of the school. I didn't see Lily right away, but then I spotted her walking toward the school gate, holding something. Another toy. A shiny new puzzle box, something I hadn't seen before. And right behind her, there was someone. A tall figure in a black hoodie, face hidden under the hood, standing just far enough away that they were almost out of sight. I froze. My heart pounded. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to rush in and grab Lily, pull her away from whoever this was. But I couldn't move. The person didn't approach her. They just stood there, watching her, waiting. Then, as Lily passed by, the figure took a step back, vanishing into the shadows. I rushed over, grabbed Lily, and asked her what happened. She didn't seem scared, though. She just looked at me, confused. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. Not one that made sense, anyway. We left the school and never went back to that spot again. I don't know who that person was or why they were giving my daughter gifts, but I've kept her close ever since. I stopped asking her about it because I don't want to hear more. But every now and then, I still wonder if that person's out there, watching. I still don't really know what happened that night, but I can't get it out of my head. It was just a regular Tuesday. At least, it started out that way. I'd been working from home for the last few months due to the pandemic, so I was used to the quiet routine. I woke up late, had my coffee, and spent most of the day dealing with emails and a few conference calls. Nothing unusual. By the time the evening rolled around, I was pretty tired, so I decided to relax for a bit before going to bed early. I remember sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, just unwinding. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just the usual mindless scrolling. I must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I remember was waking up to the sound of a voice in the living room. "Hey, you awake?" I jolted upright, eyes wide. For a split second, I thought I was dreaming or maybe my brain was still half asleep. I looked around. The room was dim, but I could see the shape of someone sitting on the couch across from me. A man. Someone I didn't recognize. My heart started pounding. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe I had sleepily gotten up and invited a friend over, but no one was supposed to be here. I checked my phone, no messages, no missed calls. Nothing out of the ordinary. I stared at him for a moment. He was just sitting there, slouched, looking like he belonged. He wasn't doing anything weird, just sitting. I could barely make out his features in the dim light, but I could tell he wasn't young. Mid-30s, maybe? He was dressed casually, like someone who'd been at home all day. "Ah, who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. He didn't seem to register my discomfort. In fact, he looked more surprised by my question than anything. Like I'd just woken up in the middle of a conversation we'd been having for hours. "Come on, don't joke with me," he said, a little chuckle in his voice. "You know who I am. I've been living here for years now." That hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at him, trying to piece together the situation. I didn't know this guy. I was absolutely certain of that. I couldn't even recall seeing him anywhere in my life, let alone living with me for years. I took a quick glance around the apartment, as if something might change and explain all this away. But no, everything looked exactly the way I left it. Same furniture, same coffee table, same TV remote. You're mistaken," I stammered, trying to stand up but feeling dizzy all of a sudden. I don't know who you are. This is my apartment. He raised an eyebrow, like he wasn't even concerned by my response. What, did you hit your head or something? He shifted his position on the couch, making himself more comfortable, and continued as though nothing was wrong. It's all right, don't worry about it. You've just been a little out of it lately. We all go through phases. I took a couple of steps back. What was going on? Was this some kind of prank? No, I didn't know him. I didn't recognize him. This wasn't a joke. Do you live in the building? Did you get the wrong apartment? I asked, my voice getting more frantic now. I needed him to leave. I needed him to get out of my apartment. He shook his head, that smirk still on his face. You're acting weird. Don't you remember me? I've been here every night after work for the past few years. Hell, I've even done the dishes a couple times. You should be thanking me. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing. I tried to process what he was saying, but it didn't make sense. I looked at the door, considering running out of the apartment, but my legs were like jelly. The man was still sitting there, almost relaxed now, like he wasn't even concerned that I was panicking. I backed up slowly, moving toward the kitchen. I didn't know what else to do. You need to leave, I said, more forcefully now. I don't know you, and you can't just sit here. At that, he stood up from the couch, moving toward me. His movements weren't fast or aggressive, but I felt a chill run through me as he closed the distance between us. It's fine, really, he said, his tone softening, like he was trying to calm me down. I know you've been stressed lately. Maybe you just need a nap or something. I'll go make us some coffee. We can talk, just like we always do. I felt a surge of panic rise up in me. Stop, I said, voice shaking, taking another step back. Please. You need to leave. His face shifted, the smile fading, and for the first time, there was something dark in his eyes. Something that sent a wave of dread over me. He didn't respond right away. He just stood there, watching me, and for a moment, I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. And then he spoke again, but this time his voice wasn't reassuring. It wasn't calm. It was cold. You really don't remember, do you? I had no idea what he meant. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight. I couldn't even think straight anymore. This was wrong. This whole situation was wrong. Suddenly, he stepped forward again, close enough that I could feel his breath on my face. I could hear the rustle of his clothes as he moved. I know it's been tough for you, but I'm not going anywhere. This is my place, too, and you can't just pretend I'm not here. Not anymore. I wanted to run. I had to get out, but my feet wouldn't move. My mind was paralyzed, like my body had forgotten how to react to danger. But then, just as quickly as he had come forward, he backed off. He turned and walked toward the door of the apartment without another word, as if everything was normal, like I was the crazy one. He opened the door, glanced over his shoulder at me, and for a split second, I saw something in his eyes that sent a fresh wave of panic through me, something like a warning. I'll be back tomorrow, he said quietly, almost like an afterthought, before stepping out and closing the door behind him. I stood there in complete silence for what felt like forever. My heart was hammering in my chest. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on me. The man was gone, but the words he had said kept echoing in my mind. I'll be back tomorrow. I don't know how long I stood there, too afraid to move, too terrified to think. It was only when I heard my neighbor's door open a few moments later that I snapped out of it. I ran to the window and peered out, but there was no sign of him. I still don't know who he was or why he was in my apartment. I've told my friends and family about it, but they all think I'm just stressed out or imagining things. But I know what I saw. I know what he said. I haven't seen him again, but I still lock the door every night, double check the windows, and make sure no one's around before I leave. I don't know if he's really gone. I borrowed the USB drive because I forgot mine at home, and I needed to move a bunch of invoices from my desktop to the server. It wasn't a big deal. I asked Dan, he sat 2 desks over, and he just pulled one from his drawer and handed it to me without even looking. I didn't know Dan very well. He wasn't unfriendly, just quiet. Showed up on time, did his work, never joined in for drinks or lunch. He had this weird little wristwatch he checked constantly, like a nervous tick. Anyway, I plugged the USB in and copied over my files. While it was transferring, I noticed something. There was a folder called Reports, which made sense, he worked in QA. But under that, buried in one of the subfolders, was another folder named after me. My first and last name. No caps, no spaces, just my name. At first, I thought maybe it was a file I'd sent him before, like a document or something I'd written. But it wasn't a single file. It was a folder with almost 100 items in it. Photos, mostly. Some looked like screenshots of emails. Some were just plain text files with dates for file names. There were even a few scanned handwritten notes, like from a notebook. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But I did. The photos were mostly of me. Walking into the office. Standing at the coffee machine. Getting into my car. A couple were taken through the glass of the break room, me eating lunch, looking at my phone. None of them looked like selfies or friendly shots. They were all taken from a distance, like surveillance. I sat there frozen for a minute, just clicking through them, trying to make sense of it. Some of the photos were months old, I could tell from my haircut. One of them was from the grocery store near my apartment. I recognized the freezer section and the jacket I was wearing. The text files weren't much better. One just said, July 14th, arrived at office 8:38 a.m. Break room 8:45, coffee, 2 sugars. Bathroom 10:12 a.m. Left desk 12 o'clock sharp, lunch, Tupperware, red lid. That was it. Like someone tracking me. Like I was a project or something. Every day had a little entry. Some were longer than others, especially if I left the building during lunch. A few times, it noted who I talked to, what I wore, whether I laughed. The last entry was dated that same morning. I yanked the drive out without ejecting it. Didn't care. Walked straight to the bathroom and just stood there, shaking. I didn't know what to do. It didn't feel like something I could just bring up casually. Hey Dan, why do you have a stalker folder about me? I thought maybe I was misunderstanding it. Like maybe he was working on some weird experiment for a class. Or maybe I had emailed him once asking for help and forgot. But the grocery store photo killed that theory. That wasn't anywhere near our office. That was near my apartment. And the timestamp said it was taken at 9:17 p.m. I went back to my desk and tried to act normal, but I couldn't stop glancing over at him. He didn't look any different than usual. Just typing away, checking his watch. He didn't seem nervous or sneaky or anything. I waited until lunch to bring the drive back. I walked over and held it out, trying to act casual. He didn't look up, just said, "Thanks," and took it. That was it. I didn't eat that day. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. Why me? Had I done something to piss him off? Was he doing this to other people too? I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick. Then I started thinking he might notice that and write it down. I tried to tell myself maybe he was just socially off. Like, maybe it was harmless. But how do you explain handwritten notes about what someone eats and when they laugh? 2 days later, I went back in. Dan wasn't there. I asked around casually, like, hey, Dan out today? Someone said he was on PTO for the week. That gave me a weird feeling, like maybe he knew I saw the files. When I got home that night, I checked my mailbox. There was a plain white envelope in it, no name, no return address. I almost didn't open it. Inside were 6 printed photos. All of me. One from the gas station. One from my balcony. One that was clearly taken through my living room window. I was sitting on the couch with my laptop, and the TV was on in the background. I don't have curtains in the living room. Hadn't really needed them. I live on the 3rd floor. I called the police. They sent someone out, and I showed them everything, the USB files, the envelope, the photos. They took it seriously at first. An officer even went to Dan's address, but no one answered. They said without a direct threat or proof of trespassing, there wasn't much they could do yet. They suggested I get security cameras and change my routine for a while. Not exactly comforting advice. That night, I didn't sleep either. I sat in the dark, listening for sounds outside my window. Nothing came. I didn't go to work the next day or the day after. I started carrying a knife. Just a little one. I didn't want to, it felt ridiculous, but I also didn't feel safe. By the end of the week, HR emailed everyone saying Dan had resigned. No explanation. Just that he was no longer employed and his email had been deactivated. I never saw him again. A few days after that, I got another envelope in the mail. Same style. Inside were 2 more photos, both older. One was from over a year ago, me sitting in a restaurant with my sister. The other was from a party, maybe 2 years back. I was standing in a group, talking to someone. That one messed with me. Because I didn't recognize the background or remember being there. I looked happy. Relaxed. On the back of the photo, in tiny letters, someone had written, "You weren't paying attention." That's when I moved. New apartment, different part of town. Top floor again, but this time I got blackout curtains. No social media under my real name. No sharing my location. I don't use ride shares unless I absolutely have to. I don't talk about work or where I live online. No more USB drives from coworkers either. It was supposed to be a chill week. My friend Eric was flying out to visit his girlfriend in Portland, and he asked if I could house sit while he was gone. Just feed the cat, water a couple plants, grab the mail. That kind of thing. I'd stayed at his place before. Nothing weird about it. 1-story house in a quiet part of town, kind of old but clean. He'd just gotten the floors redone, and the backyard had one of those ugly sheds that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. No basement, technically, but there was a crawl space under the house with a trapdoor in the hallway closet. He pointed it out before leaving and said not to worry about it. Only go down there if there's, like, a pipe burst or something. I nodded and didn't think about it again. The first couple days were fine. The cat Penny was skittish but warmed up quick. I was working remotely, so I just posed up at the kitchen table with my laptop, take breaks in the backyard. It was quiet. Peaceful, honestly. On the third night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. Not loud ones, just soft, quick taps, like someone walking barefoot on wood. I figured it was Penny, but when I turned on the light, she was curled up at the foot of the bed, dead asleep. I walked around the house, checked the doors. Everything was locked. No sign of anything off. Next morning, I chalked it up to a dream. Later that day, I noticed the hallway closet door was open. Just a little. The latch didn't really hold well, so I assumed it had drifted open. I pushed it shut. But later that evening, it was open again. Just a crack. It started nagging at me. I told myself I'd wedge something against it so it'd stay closed, but when I looked closer, I saw a faint draft coming from the trapdoor. That crawl space. It gave me a weird feeling I couldn't shake, but I tried not to dwell on it. Still, something had shifted after that. The house didn't feel quite as still. I kept hearing little noises at night. The floor creaked like someone was shifting their weight in the hallway, but when I checked, nothing. The cat started acting weird too. She'd stand facing the closet and just stare. Ears forward, tail low. Once she even hissed. So on day 5, I opened the trapdoor. I told myself it was just to make sure nothing was going on down there. No animals, no busted pipe. I wasn't even planning to go in, just take a peek. I pulled the door up and was hit with this rush of stale air. It smelled like old dirt and something. Chemical? Not strong, just faint. Like plastic left in the sun too long. There was a short wooden ladder, and I climbed down with my phone flashlight. The crawl space wasn't very big, maybe 3 feet high at the center, just enough to crouch. Insulation lining the ceiling, packed dirt floor. It was gold. I scanned around and saw nothing at first. Then, tucked into the far corner, was a plastic storage bin. One of those gray ones with the snap-on lid. I crawled over and opened it. Inside were a bunch of notebooks. Old, worn ones. Spiral-bound, yellow legal pads, even a few composition books. Every single one had something written on the cover, dates, sometimes names. One said Hannah, March, June. Another just said occupant number 3. I took out one of the smaller notebooks and flipped it open. The handwriting was small, neat. Everything was written like a list. 6:13 a.m., woke up, turned on bathroom light. 6:20 a.m., flushed toilet, brushed teeth. 6:36 a.m., left bedroom, entered kitchen. 6:38 a.m., toaster on. 6:39 a.m., ate one piece of toast, dry. 6:41 a.m., walked to window, looked outside 23 seconds. 6:46 a.m., turned TV on, volume low. It went on like that. Line after line. Every action, every minute accounted for. I opened another notebook. Same thing. Different handwriting. Different person. I flipped through a dozen pages. All of it detailed like that. Sleep times, meals, when they sneezed, how long they used a microwave, how often they checked their phone. I put the book down and backed out of the crawl space. The whole rest of the day, I kept thinking about it. Who had written those? Eric said he'd bought the house 3 years ago, but these notebooks looked older than that. And why keep them? Why hide them down there? I didn't mention anything to him. Just went to bed and locked the bedroom door. But I didn't sleep. At some point, around midnight, I heard that creaking again. Floorboards. slow this time, like someone walking carefully. I sat up in bed and listened. Then came a soft tap. Just one. On the bedroom door. I didn't move. My heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. No more sounds after that. I stayed awake until the sun came up. When I finally got up the courage to open the door, nothing was there. Just Penny, staring at the end of the hallway. That morning, I texted Eric and asked him if he'd ever been in the crawl space. He replied, "Nah, never bothered. Too cramped." I didn't respond. That afternoon, I opened the bin again. I dug deeper this time. At the bottom, there was a folder, just a plain manila folder, dirty around the edges. Inside were Polaroids. Dozens. All taken from the same angle through windows. Some at night, some during the day. All of people inside the house. Some sitting at the kitchen table. One of a woman brushing her teeth. Another of a man asleep on the couch. None of them were Eric. None of them were me either, thank God. But the last few photos were dated only a few months before Eric said he moved in. One even had a timestamp. Under the pile of Polaroids was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Do not make noise after 11 p.m. Stay out of the crawl space. No guests longer than 3 days. Keep windows uncovered. Use front door only. Do not change locks. That was all it said. I put everything back, closed the bin, and climbed out. I didn't tell Eric. I didn't tell anyone. That night, I packed my stuff and left. Texted Eric that there was a family emergency and I had to go. He said it was fine. The only other time I heard from him was a couple weeks later. He called, said he'd been hearing weird noises at night. I asked him if he'd looked in the crawl space. He said no. Said he didn't even know there was one. It started when I got to the hotel in the late afternoon. I had been traveling alone for a few days and was ready for some rest. I had booked a room at a place I found online, nothing fancy, just somewhere I could crash for the night before continuing my trip the next day. It was one of those small, roadside hotels, the kind you find on the outskirts of a city. The lobby was old but clean enough, and the receptionist was a guy who looked like he'd been working there for way too long. I checked in, got my key card, and went up to the room. Everything was normal. The bed was made, the curtains were drawn, and the TV was one of those old tube ones with a handful of channels. I didn't care. I was tired, so I took a shower, threw on some sweatpants, and climbed into bed with my phone to watch a show. I must have fallen asleep, but I woke up in the middle of the night, around 3 a.m., and decided I needed something from the vending machine. I grabbed my key card, put on my shoes, and left the room. The hallways of the hotel were dimly lit, kind of shabby, but I didn't think much of it. Just another standard motel. When I got back to my room, I swiped the card, but the little green light didn't come on. I swiped again. Nothing. I pressed the card harder against the sensor and tried again. Still nothing. I stood there for a moment, confused. It was a stupid thing, really, just a key card not working. I figured it was just a glitch or something, so I decided to go back downstairs and ask the front desk for a new card. I walked back to the elevator, annoyed but not really worried. The guy at the desk had been nice enough when I checked in, so I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. But when I got down to the lobby, there was no one behind the counter. It was empty. I knocked lightly on the counter, and after a few seconds, a voice called out from behind a door, Yeah, what can I do for you? I went around the corner, and there he was. The receptionist guy, but he looked a little disheveled now, like maybe he had just woken up. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and he had a coffee cup in his hand. "Hi," I said. "My key card isn't working. I just got here a few hours ago. Can you give me a new one?" He blinked at me for a second, like he was confused. Then he set his coffee cup down on the counter and reached for the computer. "You checked out already," he said flatly. "Your card was canceled earlier today." I stared at him, not understanding. "What?" "No, I just checked in. I came here a few hours ago, around 4 or 5. He looked at me, then back at the screen. "Nope, it says here you checked out hours ago." "Sorry, I don't know what to tell you." "Are you serious?" I asked, trying to keep calm. "I haven't left this hotel. I'm still in the same room." "What do you mean I checked out?" He paused, glancing at the computer screen again. "Sorry, but the system says you checked out. Your key card was deactivated. I can't give you a new one." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. I was starting to get that feeling, you know? The one where everything seems off, like something you can't quite explain is wrong. I thought maybe he was messing with me at first. But when I looked at his face, I could tell he wasn't joking. "I'm telling you, I never checked out," I said, trying to stay calm. "I just got here. I need a new card. Please." He rubbed his eyes, clearly frustrated. "Look, lady, I don't know what to tell you. The system's saying you're not here anymore." I wasn't sure if I should laugh or scream at him. I had just been in that room a few hours ago. I had just walked out to go to the vending machine. How could I have checked out? "Can you check again?" I asked. "Please, I need to get back in my room." He sighed and turned back to the computer. I waited, tapping my fingers against the counter. The minutes felt like they stretched out longer than they should have. Finally, he looked up, but he didn't seem any less frustrated. "Sorry, I don't know what to tell you," he said again. "You're not in the system. You checked out." I stood there, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. I was standing right there in the lobby, talking to him. How could I have checked out hours ago? Is there another way I can get in? I asked, my voice shaking slightly now. "Can you open the door for me?" He shook his head. "I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that." I didn't know what else to say. The whole situation felt insane. I had no idea what was happening or why this guy was acting like I was the one in the wrong. At that point, my heart was pounding. I had to go back to my room. It was late, and I was alone. The idea of wandering around in the middle of the night, with nothing but a vague memory of my room's location, wasn't appealing. But there was no other choice. "I'm going back upstairs," I said, though it felt like the words were more for my own reassurance than anything else. "I'm going to check my room again." He didn't say anything else. He just watched me, his eyes narrowed like he was waiting for me to do something stupid. I turned and walked back toward the elevator. My hands were sweating, and I was starting to feel dizzy. The elevator felt like it took too long to get to the second floor. When I got to the hallway, I hesitated. I didn't know which room was mine anymore. I stood there, feeling a strange mix of panic and confusion. There were no signs that anything had changed, but somehow, it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I took a deep breath, then walked to the end of the hall, where I remembered my room had been. I approached the door, heart racing, and reached for the handle. It turned easily, and I pushed the door open. The room was exactly the same. Nothing was out of place. The bed was still made. The curtains were still drawn. But it felt wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be there. I stepped inside and looked around, half expecting something to jump out at me, but it was just a normal hotel room. I closed the door behind me and locked it. I didn't care about the key card anymore. I just wanted to lie down and forget about the whole thing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like the world had twisted around me, and I was stuck in some kind of loop that didn't make sense. The rest of the night passed without incident. I woke up the next morning, a little shaken but ready to leave. When I checked out, I didn't see the receptionist. The lobby was empty. I didn't want to stick around any longer, so I left the keycard on the counter and walked out without looking back. I've tried to forget about it, but it's been weeks now, and I can't get the feeling out of my head. It started a few weeks ago. I had just moved into a new apartment, one of those older buildings where the walls are thin and everything creaks, but I didn't mind. It was in a decent neighborhood, and the rent was affordable. I was ready to settle in, put my stuff down, and get back to a normal routine after a rough couple of months. The first week was fine. I unpacked, went to work, came home. Just the usual stuff. The neighbors seemed nice enough, quiet for the most part. The walls were thin, like I said, so I could hear a lot more than I probably should have. But that didn't bother me, not at first. Then, on the 10th day, I found the first note. I came home from work, as usual, and when I got to my door, I noticed something odd. There was a small, folded piece of paper tucked under the crack at the bottom of the door. At first, I thought it was just a flyer or maybe some kind of advertisement, but then I noticed the handwriting. It was neat, but there was something about it that made me uneasy. It wasn't the writing itself, it was how the note was worded. It said, "I saw you leave at 8:15 this morning. You didn't take the trash out. Don't forget next time." I remember feeling a little weirded out. I hadn't even thought twice about taking the trash out that morning. It was just something I normally did, but I had forgotten that day. I figured it was just a harmless thing, maybe a neighbor reminding me to do it next time. But the fact that someone had noticed, someone who had been watching me, made me uneasy. I threw the note away and didn't think much of it. But the next day, another one appeared. This one was slipped under the door while I was in the bathroom. It was just a small piece of paper, no more than a few words. "I saw you on the balcony yesterday, reading. You looked calm." My stomach dropped when I read that. I never used the balcony. Not once. I didn't even know why I'd left the door open that day. But somehow, someone had been able to see inside. Someone was watching. The third note came the following morning. This one was even stranger. "You always leave the blinds open when you're in the kitchen. I can see you every time you cook." That was it. I was officially creeped out. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to confront anyone. What if it was just some weird neighbor who was harmless? But I didn't feel safe. I started locking my door when I was home, double-checking the locks every time. I kept the blinds closed. I was hyper-aware of every sound, every little creak in the walls. But the notes didn't stop. They kept coming, always slid under the door when I wasn't looking. Always with details that only someone who had been in my apartment or right outside it could know. Things like, "You always take your shoes off by the door when you come in," and "the way you tap your fingers on the counter when you're thinking, it's like a nervous habit." The notes kept coming, and the feeling of being watched got worse. I started to wonder if it was someone from the building, maybe someone who had a key or had been able to sneak in at some point. But no one ever saw anyone coming or going. The landlord seemed to think it was nothing, just some bored person who had nothing better to do. But it wasn't just that, it was the fact that whoever it was paying attention to everything I did. The smallest details. Every movement, every action. It was like they were cataloging me, watching me constantly. I stopped sleeping much. I kept the lights off at night, hoping no one could see inside. I started to leave the apartment for longer periods, walking around the neighborhood, trying to get away from the constant feeling of someone in the shadows. But I couldn't escape it. I couldn't shake the thought that whoever it was, they knew me better than I knew myself. The notes were getting bolder, too. They started to include more personal things. You don't like being touched. I've noticed how you flinch every time someone gets too close at work, one note read. Another said, I see you look at your phone a lot when you're stressed, but you never actually text anyone. I thought about going to the police, but what could I even tell them? Someone was leaving creepy notes. It wasn't exactly a crime, and I didn't have any evidence. Besides, there was always the chance that the person might just be some harmless neighbor. What if I was overreacting? Then, one night, I decided to stay home and get some sleep. It had been a long week, and I was exhausted. I'd left the kitchen light on, but I kept the blinds closed, hoping to avoid drawing any more attention. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Soft, slow, almost like they were trying not to be heard. I lay there in bed, frozen, listening. The footsteps stopped outside my door, and I could hear breathing. It was quiet, steady. I didn't know if it was my imagination or if someone was actually standing there. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the sweat starting to form on my palms. I held my breath, hoping they would go away. But then there was a soft tap at the door. Not a knock, more like a light touch, like someone was testing to see if it was locked. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I kept my eyes on the door, praying that whoever it was would leave. But then, the handle turned. Slowly. I didn't know what to do. I was too scared to get up, too terrified to move. The door didn't open, but I could feel the weight of the person on the other side, just standing there. Listening. Waiting. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps receded. The pressure on the door was gone. The silence returned. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed up, listening to every little creak in the apartment, every sound outside. When the sun came up, I quickly gathered my things, locked up, and left. I didn't go back to the apartment. I couldn't. The thought of whoever was watching me, someone who knew everything about me, was too much. I don't know who it was or what they wanted. I don't know if I'll ever find out. But I never went back to that building. And I'll never forget how it felt to know someone had been watching, studying, waiting for the right moment to get closer. I moved across town, into a new place. I haven't gotten any notes here. But sometimes, when I walk down the street, I'll catch someone staring at me. And I can't help but wonder, is it the same person? I moved into the house in the spring. It was one of those older places, kind of run down but with a lot of character. The landlord was a guy in his mid-50s, tall and skinny with graying hair. He seemed nice enough when I met him, quiet, kept to himself, but that wasn't a big deal. I was just looking for somewhere affordable and safe, and he'd offered me a room for rent that was exactly what I needed. The first couple of weeks were fine. I kept to myself, mostly work, the gym, grabbing takeout when I didn't feel like cooking. But then I started noticing a few little things. First, it was the weird way the house smelled. It wasn't terrible or anything, but it had this stale, musty odor, like old furniture that never got aired out. I couldn't really place it, but I figured it was just part of living in a house that old. The landlord, Mr. Simmons, was a bit of a mystery. I never saw him leave the house. Ever. I'd come home after a long day, and he'd be in his usual spot in the kitchen, standing at the counter, staring out the window. Sometimes I'd hear him talking to someone, but when I'd peek in, no one was there. He'd just mumble to himself, like he was having a conversation with someone I couldn't see. At first, I thought it was just me overthinking things. Maybe he was one of those people who liked to be home all the time. I mean, maybe he worked from home or had some other reason to not leave. But it started to feel off. I never heard him walk around the house. Not once. It was like he existed in this weird, silent bubble. The only sounds that came from his side of the house were soft, indistinct noises, like the shuffle of his feet or the occasional creak of floorboards. But it was the breathing through the fence that really started to mess with my head. At night, when I would lay down in bed, I'd hear it. Soft at first, like a distant sigh, and then it would get louder. I could feel it, the steady rhythm, like someone was standing right behind my vent and breathing through it. It wasn't like regular air conditioning noises, or the house settling. No, this was too deliberate. Too human. I tried to ignore it at first, convincing myself it was just the house making noise. But then it happened again and again. Every night, without fail. The worst part was, it wasn't just the sound of someone breathing, it felt like someone was watching me. I'd lie in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to stop, but it never did. That breathing just kept going. One evening, I decided I'd had enough of it. I needed answers. I wanted to know if Mr. Simmons was really here all the time or if I was just losing my mind. So, I decided to be quiet for once, to stay up late and see if I could catch him doing something weird. Around midnight, I sat in the living room, lights off, just waiting. I could hear the usual hum of the house, the refrigerator, the occasional car passing outside. And then, the breathing started. Quiet at first, but growing louder. I froze. It was coming from the vent in the wall. I could feel the cold draft of air as it hit my skin. The sound was getting more pronounced now, a steady in and out, like someone was standing directly over it, breathing slowly and deliberately. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, maybe just the house or the old pipes, but the more I heard it, the more my stomach churned. It was too real. I waited until the sound stopped, and then I grabbed my phone. I needed to see if Mr. Simmons was still in the house. Quietly, I tiptoed down the hallway to his side of the house. The whole place was eerily silent. I could hear my own breath in the stillness as I crept closer to his door. His light was on, but there was no sound from inside his room. I stood outside his door for a moment, just listening. I thought I heard something. A shuffle, like feet against the floor. And then, breathing. I couldn't believe it. The same rhythmic inhaling and exhaling, like he was right there on the other side of the door. I almost lost my nerve right then, but I couldn't back down now. I needed to know what was going on. I took a deep breath, opened the door a crack, and peeked inside. The room was dimly lit, but empty. There was no one there. The bed was perfectly made, and everything was in its place. But the door to the closet was slightly ajar, and I could see a shadow moving inside. My heart dropped. I backed away quickly, nearly knocking over a lamp. The sound of breathing from the vent grew louder, and now I could hear a faint rustling, like someone was moving around just on the other side of the wall. I didn't know what to do. I had to get out of there. I ran back to my room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. For the first time since I'd moved in, I was genuinely scared. I kept the light on and didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, I didn't say anything to Mr. Simmons. I wasn't sure how to approach it, and honestly, I didn't even want to. I packed up my stuff and went to work, barely able to focus. The whole day, I kept wondering if I was just imagining things. Was I being paranoid? But then, when I got home, the house felt different. It was colder than usual, and that stale air was thicker now, more suffocating. I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. I'd been planning to move out soon anyway, but now I was terrified. Every little noise felt like it was coming from him, those quiet footsteps, that slow breathing. It was like I was living in someone else's house, and they were never going to let me leave. The next day, I moved out. I packed my things in a hurry, barely even looking back as I grabbed my bags. As I was walking out, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. The door to Mr. Simmons' room was open. I didn't know if it had been like that before, but I couldn't bring myself to check. I didn't stay in touch with him after that. I found another place, somewhere far away from the house. But sometimes, late at night, I can still hear that breathing in my head, and I wonder if he's still there, just waiting, watching. I don't know when it started, but I noticed it one day after work. It wasn't anything huge, just a small shift in something I hadn't touched. My living room lamp was facing a little more toward the wall than usual, like someone had bumped into it. It seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I'd done it myself, right? I mean, I wasn't exactly paying attention when I got home. It was late, I was tired, and I just needed to unwind. The next day, it happened again. I was pretty sure I hadn't moved the coffee table, but it was pushed just a tiny bit closer to the couch. And the throw blanket that was folded neatly? Now it was sort of tossed over the armrest like someone had sat down and gotten comfortable. I thought I was being paranoid. I was living alone in a fairly quiet building, and nothing about my neighbors stood out as weird. I've lived there for about 6 months already without any issues, and I had a decent routine. I worked late sometimes I'd be out with friends or grabbing dinner. So I figured maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Still, a little nagging feeling started to form in the back of my mind. It wasn't until the third time that I really started to get creeped out. I was away all day, out with friends, and when I came back, everything seemed normal. But then I noticed something. My bathroom towel wasn't hanging the way I'd left it. It was folded neatly, but now it was draped over the edge of the towel rack, like someone had grabbed it and just tossed it there. I knew I hadn't done that. I always fold it the same way. I stood there in the bathroom for a second, just staring at the towel, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. My heart started beating a little faster. Was someone coming into my apartment when I wasn't there? That thought made me feel cold. I was certain nothing was stolen, but these small, subtle changes made it clear someone was in here when I wasn't. I didn't know how long this had been happening, but now I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next few days were quiet, and honestly, I tried to forget about it. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I didn't tell anyone. What was I going to say? Hey, I think someone's moving my lamp and folding my towel in a weird way when I'm not home. Yeah, that wouldn't go over well. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I started locking my apartment door every time I left, double-checking the windows, and even making sure nothing was out of place when I came back, but it didn't stop. One day, I came home after a long shift, and I didn't even have the energy to pay attention to anything. I just wanted to eat, take a shower, and go to bed. But when I walked into my living room, I froze. The bookshelf in the corner was the only thing I had in that room that was a bit cluttered. I'd been meaning to clean it up, but every time I thought about it, I'd get distracted. Anyway, there were a few books on the shelf that I always left on the bottom, and now they were moved up one shelf, arranged in a different order. The weirdest part? One of them was open, like someone had been reading it. That was when I really started to panic. Someone had been in here for sure. But why didn't they take anything? What were they doing? I started going through everything in my apartment, checking drawers, looking through my stuff, but nothing was missing. Everything was there. I couldn't make sense of it. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe it was just my imagination. But there was one thing I couldn't explain: the smell. It wasn't anything obvious, but when I got close to my kitchen counter, there was a faint trace of cologne in the air. I hadn't worn cologne in days. I couldn't remember the last time I'd even used any, and the smell was too strong to be a coincidence. It lingered near the counter for a while, like someone had stood there recently. That night, I set up a camera. I didn't expect anything to happen, but at that point, I was desperate for answers. I'd heard of people installing cameras to catch intruders, so I figured it couldn't hurt. I was hoping I'd catch a glimpse of someone coming through my door, or maybe a shadow walking across my hallway. Anything that would explain the feeling that something was off. I didn't sleep well that night. Every little creak in the building made me jump. The next morning, I rushed to check the footage, but there was nothing. No one entered my apartment, at least not on camera. My heart sank. What the hell was going on? Maybe I was crazy. Maybe it was just the stress. But then I noticed something strange. The footage from the night before didn't match up with the times I remembered. I was almost certain I had been home earlier than the timestamp showed. I checked my phone, and sure enough, I had gotten a text from a friend at 7:30, but the footage said I hadn't arrived home until 9 o'clock. I didn't know how to explain it, and that feeling of being watched came back full force. How had the camera been tampered with? Was someone going through my apartment while I wasn't there, then going back and messing with the footage? I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to leave for a few days, get out of the apartment, stay with a friend. I told myself I just needed a break from all of it. Maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe I was imagining everything. I left the apartment, locking up like I always did. But when I came back, I noticed something that made me sick. The lamp in my living room was turned on. It wasn't on when I left. I would have remembered that. I even checked the switch before I left. It was definitely off. But now it was glowing in the corner of the room, casting long shadows on the walls. It was small, but in that moment, it felt like the biggest thing. Someone had been in here. I didn't bother looking around anymore. I grabbed my bag, locked the door behind me, and never went back. I stayed at my friend's place and eventually moved to a new apartment. I didn't care if I had to pay extra. It didn't matter. I couldn't stay in that place anymore. Too many things had been wrong, and I didn't feel safe there. I still don't know who was in my apartment or why they did it. I didn't report it to the police. I figured it wouldn't do any good, and by then, I was too freaked out to even think straight. Whoever it was never took anything. They never left anything obvious, just subtle things that made it clear they had been there. I hope I never find out who it was. I don't want to know. But I'll never forget that feeling of being watched. It's still with me. And every time I walk into a room now, I check everything. Every light, every shadow. Just in case. I don't know what made me check the closet that day. Maybe it was because the place had started feeling a little too quiet, or maybe it was because I'd been gone a lot the last few days and just had a weird feeling. I'd been out of town for work, and when I came back, everything was exactly how I left it, except, well, it wasn't. It started when I got home and saw the mud on the floor in the hallway. At first, I thought maybe I had stepped in it without realizing, but when I took off my shoes and looked closer, I saw that the muddy tracks weren't for me. The mud was too fresh, too thick, and it was all over the place. Right up to my bedroom door. I checked my shoes again, but no, nothing. I hadn't stepped in any mud. I stood there for a while, just staring at the tracks, trying to figure out what was going on. My brain couldn't make sense of it, so I decided to do what I normally do in these situations, ignore it, deal with it later. I thought maybe it was some freak accident, or maybe I'd been sleepwalking or something. It was a strange thought, but it was the only one that made any kind of sense in the moment. But then, as I turned to head to the kitchen, I noticed something else. Something that really made my stomach tighten. The closet door was slightly open. I always make sure it's closed when I leave. Always. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I had forgotten. But then I walked over to close it, and that's when I saw them. The boots. Big, muddy, and definitely not mine. They were sitting right there in the middle of the floor, looking out of place against my otherwise neat and empty closet. They were covered in dirt, and I could see streaks of it leading from the boots toward the back of the closet. I didn't recognize them at all. They looked worn, like they'd been used for a long time, but the mud on them was so fresh. I didn't know what to think. I reached down to touch them, and as soon as my fingers brushed against the wet soles, I felt this cold wave of dread wash over me. My mind started racing. Who the hell would have left their boots in my closet? And how did they get there? I never let anyone inside when I'm not home. The last few weeks had been quiet, no visitors, no parties, just work and the usual routine. I don't even remember how long I stood there, staring at the boots. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but who could I even tell? I couldn't explain this. I just kept thinking over and over, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Finally, I took a deep breath, told myself to calm down, and tried to make sense of the situation. Maybe someone had broken in. It was a possibility, but the place didn't feel disturbed. No signs of forced entry, nothing was missing. No valuables had been taken. But the boots, the muddy footprints. It felt like someone had been here. Recently. I put the boots back in the closet, closed the door, and stood there for a few minutes. Trying to clear my mind, trying to convince myself it was a mistake. Maybe I was just tired, maybe I'd overlooked something. But then I turned and saw something else. There were dirt streaks on the floor in front of my bedroom window. Long smudges, as if something had been dragged across the floor. The window was shut, but the dirt led up to it like someone had been standing there, looking inside. I went over to the window, pulled back the blinds, but nothing was outside. Nothing was amiss, but I knew someone had been here. The tracks, the boots, they weren't my imagination. Whoever was in here had been in my bedroom. Right under my nose. I stepped back, breathing heavier now, my hands starting to shake. I walked over to the bed, looked underneath it. I'm not sure why. It wasn't like I expected to find anything, but I had to look. I even checked the closet again, convinced that somehow I'd missed something. Nothing. Just the boots staring up at me from the closet floor. I called my brother. He's the only person I trust when things get weird, and honestly, I wasn't sure what else to do. I couldn't figure out if I was losing my mind or if someone had really been in here. Hey, I need you to come over, I said, my voice probably sounding more panicked than I intended. Something weird's going on. Can you come by? He showed up about an hour later. I don't think he realized how serious it was at first. I showed him the boots, and his face dropped. He didn't say much, but I could tell that he felt the same unease I did. I'll check the back door, he said, looking over at me. You sure you locked everything? I nodded. I always lock my doors. Always. He checked all the locks, even the ones on the windows, and everything seemed fine. No signs of a break-in, no signs that anyone had been in the house. It didn't make sense. The boots, the tracks, they were still there. But everything else looked normal. My brother left after a while. He was quiet, but I could tell he was concerned, too. He said to keep an eye on things, and he'd come back the next day if I needed him. I didn't want to be alone, but I didn't know what else to do. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept checking the doors and windows every hour, my mind running in circles. Every little sound outside made my heart race. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of the wind. It was like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to jump out at me. The next morning, I decided to take a different approach. I called the landlord and asked if anyone else had keys to the apartment. Maybe a previous tenant or a maintenance person. She seemed confused but said she would check her records. After a long silence, she told me that the only other person who had a key was someone who had moved out months ago. She apologized but couldn't explain why the boots were in my closet or who could have left them there. I kept thinking about that window. About the dirt, the tracks, and the feeling of someone watching me. I haven't seen any signs of a break-in since, but I still don't feel right. Every time I walk past that closet, I swear I hear something move inside it. Every time I pass the window, I feel like someone's out there, watching. I've never been so unsettled in my life. I used to babysit a lot back when I was in high school. It was just an easy way to make extra cash without having to work weekends folding clothes at the mall or something. One family, the Marshalls, they had 2 kids, Tommy and Ellie. Real sweet kids. Tommy was 7, Ellie was 5. The Marshalls lived in a big house just outside of town, kind of tucked back behind some woods. It always felt a little too quiet out there, but they paid double the usual rate, so I didn't care. This one night, they were going to some late dinner thing and asked if I could stay until around midnight. I got there at 6, we ate pizza, watched some cartoons, normal stuff. By about 8:30, I got the kids settled into bed. Tommy had this thing where he needed his closet door closed all the way before he could sleep. Ellie had a nightlight shaped like a unicorn. Same routine every time. I was sitting on the couch downstairs, scrolling through my phone, when I got the first text. It was a photo. At first, it didn't register what I was looking at. It was kinda dark and grainy. Then I realized it was Tommy's room. It was a picture of him sleeping, curled up under his Spider-Man blanket. I just stared at it for a second, confused. I checked the number. It wasn't saved. Just a random local area code. I thought maybe Mrs. Marshall had set up some nanny cams or something and was messing with me. I texted back, very funny. No reply. About 2 minutes later, another text came through. Another photo. This time it was Ellie's room. Same thing, she was asleep, clutching that unicorn nightlight like she always did. This time the angle was closer. Like whoever took it had leaned right over her. I stood up so fast I almost dropped my phone. I could feel my heart banging around in my chest. I turned around and looked toward the stairs. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge behind me and the ticking of the big wall clock. I told myself it had to be some kind of prank. Maybe one of my friends was messing with me. I didn't think much more of it. But then a third photo came through. This time, it was both of them. Tommy and Ellie, side by side, asleep. But there was something else in the shot. A shadow in the corner of Tommy's room, dark against the wall. I didn't like it. I texted back again, a little more nervously this time. Stop. This isn't funny anymore. Still no response. Then I heard something upstairs. A noise. It was a soft shuffle, like someone had stepped on carpet. But it wasn't one of the kids. They were both asleep. I sat there for a second, holding my breath, just listening. My phone vibrated again. Another photo. It was the same shot of Tommy and Ellie, but now there was something standing in the doorway. Just a dark shape, hard to make out. The more I stared at it, the more I could tell it wasn't just a shadow. It was too solid. Too defined. The feeling in my chest shifted from nervous to pure panic. I stood up, dropped my phone on the couch, and crept to the bottom of the stairs. I called out, "Tommy? Ellie?" No answer. I was about to head up to check on them when I heard the shuffle again. Only this time, it was closer. Like whoever it was coming down the stairs. I froze. Then the doorbell rang. I was so shaken, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the door. The silence between the ringing and the next noise felt like it stretched on forever. Then it rang again, this time louder. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified to open it, terrified to stay inside. I texted the number again. "Who is this?" The response was immediate. "Let me in." My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and bolted to the front door. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I looked out the peephole. No one. But then, the door rattled. Hard. Like someone was trying to break it open. I stepped back. I was freaking out. I tried to call the marshals, but no one picked up. I dialed 911, but my phone cut out. It was like something was messing with my signal. The rattling stopped for a second, then I heard it again. This time, it was quieter, but it was there. A low scraping sound, like someone was dragging something heavy along the floor. I backed up, feeling the wall against my back. I didn't know what to do. My mind was running in circles. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. For a full minute, I didn't hear anything. I stayed frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then, slowly, I walked to the door, peeking out again. Nothing. No one. I waited a moment before opening the door. My hands were shaking as I unlatched the lock. I stepped outside. The porch light flickered, casting a weak glow across the yard. No one was there. But I didn't feel better. Not at all. In fact, I felt worse. I turned around to go back inside, but that's when I saw it. The window above the stairs. It was cracked open just a little. The kids' bedroom window. I ran back in, up the stairs, and straight to their rooms. I found Tommy and Ellie still asleep, just like they were before. Safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something in that house was off. I checked every room, locked every window, every door. I kept my phone in my hand the whole time, but I didn't get another message. The marshals came home a couple of hours later. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to sound crazy. I quit babysitting after that night. Never went back to their house. I never got another text either. But I can't shake the memory of that shadow in the doorway. The one that wasn't in the photo before. The one that shouldn't have been there. I don't know who was in that house, but I'm sure it wasn't me. I was walking home from the bar around 1:30 in the morning. It wasn't far, maybe 10 minutes tops, and I'd done it 100 times before. I'd only had 2 beers, wasn't drunk, just that kind of tired you get when you've been laughing too much. It was a pretty quiet night. The streets were empty except for a few parked cars. Most of the shops were closed up, lights off, windows dark. The only real noise was the sound of my boots on the sidewalk and this light breeze that kept pushing some trash around. I cut down Maple Avenue like I always did. It's this wide, open street lined with old streetlights that buzz and flicker if you stare at them too long. I was halfway down it when I noticed someone standing under one of the lamps up ahead. They were just standing there, right in the middle of the sidewalk. I thought maybe they were waiting for an Uber or something, so I didn't think much of it at first. I just kept walking, hands stuffed in my jacket pockets. After a few more steps, I glanced up again. They hadn't moved. Still standing dead center under the light, facing straight toward me. I couldn't see much, they were just a dark shape with their head kind of tilted down, like they were looking at the ground. I slowed down without meaning to. Looked down at my phone. Pretended to check a text or something. When I looked up again, I swear they were closer. Still under the light, but not in the middle anymore, maybe 2 steps toward me. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. Depth perception's weird at night. The light was messing with my eyes. I crossed to the other side of the street without really thinking about it. Didn't even look for cars, just hurried across. Kept walking, head down. I stole another glance after a few seconds. The figure was still there. Still facing me. I couldn't see their face, but I could tell now they had their hands at their sides. Just hanging there. I picked up the pace a little. Not running, but not strolling either. I passed a couple of storefronts, a pizza place, a vape shop, all closed. No cars driving by, no open windows. It felt like I was the only person alive on the street. I told myself once I got to Birch Street, I'd be good. There's a gas station there that's open 24 hours. Lights, people. I kept my eyes straight ahead, but I could feel it. That prickly feeling like you're being stared at. Right before I reached the next streetlight, I looked back. The figure was halfway between the last light and the one I was about to pass under. Closer. Definitely closer. Still not moving though. Still dead still. I couldn't hear footsteps. No breathing. Just the hum of the lights and the rustle of the wind. My throat felt dry. I thought about calling someone, pretending to have a conversation out loud, but it felt stupid. Like if I acknowledged it, it would somehow make it worse. Instead, I just kept walking. Quicker now. My boots hitting the pavement too loud. I turned onto Birch Street, trying not to break into a full run. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the gas station. Bright and empty looking. One bored guy behind the counter. I headed for it like my life depended on it. Pushed through the door a little too hard, made the bell jingle crazy loud. The guy behind the counter barely looked up from his phone. I grabbed a water bottle from the cooler just to have an excuse to be there. When I finally looked back out the window toward Maple, there was no one under the light. No one anywhere. I stood there pretending to read the back of the water bottle for way too long. My heart was still racing. My hands were shaking. I finally paid, nodded at the cashier, and stepped back outside. I stayed close to the wall, walking toward my building, which was just 2 blocks down. The sidewalks were still empty. The breeze had picked up a little, flapping the corner of a cardboard box lying in the gutter. I told myself it was over. Whoever it was had wandered off. Probably drunk. Probably harmless. I crossed the last street before my building. Reached for my keys. That's when I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Fast. Not running, but fast. Hard-soled shoes slapping the concrete. I didn't even look. I just booked it. Full-on sprinted toward my door, fumbling with the keys so bad I dropped them. I bent down to grab them and caught a glimpse over my shoulder. The figure was there. Maybe 30 feet back. Still not running. Just striding. Long, quick steps. I shoved the key in the lock, twisted, slammed the door behind me, and threw the deadbolt. I stood there with my back pressed against the door, breathing so hard it hurt. I stayed there for a long time. Finally, I worked up the nerve to peek through the peephole. The street was empty. Just the streetlights buzzing. The wind blowing some leaves around. I didn't sleep that night. Every time a car drove by, every time the building creaked, I jumped. In the morning, when it was bright out and people were walking dogs and jogging, I forced myself to go back out and check. Nothing. No signs of anyone. No weird notes. No markings on the door. Just a normal morning. I started taking Ubers after that when I went out drinking. Stopped walking home altogether. I never saw that figure again. But sometimes, if I'm out late and I have to walk even a little bit, I'll find myself checking under every streetlight I pass. I woke up around 7, later than usual. My head felt foggy, like when you sleep too hard and your body doesn't catch up. I rolled over to check my phone, same as every morning, but the screen was already lit up with notifications. At first, I thought it was just junk news alerts, emails. But when I unlocked it, the photo app was open. The thumbnail in the corner showed my bed. I sat up, confused, and tapped into the gallery. There were dozens of pictures, all taken while it was still dark out. Some blurry, some clearer, all from inside my apartment. The first few were just my bedroom, taken from weird angles, like from the corner near the closet or down low by the floor. Then there were some from the hallway, pointed back toward my room. Then closer. Closer. I stared at them, trying to remember if maybe I had gotten up in the middle of the night and messed around with my phone. I've never sleepwalked in my life. I don't even move much when I'm sleeping. I usually wake up in the same position I fall asleep in. My heart started thumping hard in my chest. I checked the timestamps. They started around 2:17 a.m. and went until about 4:30. There was nothing after that. I tried to think of a normal explanation. Maybe I dropped my phone and it somehow kept snapping photos. but the angles didn't make sense. Some were way too steady, too purposeful. Framed almost. Like someone was standing still, aiming. I checked the apartment. I live alone. Just a one-bedroom on the second floor of a basic building, nothing fancy. Door was locked, chain still latched. Windows were locked. Nothing looked touched. I kept telling myself there had to be a reason. Maybe I had a weird dream and just wandered around. But I couldn't stop thinking about those photos. About how some of them were taken from outside my bedroom door, cracked open just enough for a camera to slip through. I decided to go through them slowly, one by one. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In one of the photos, part of the frame caught the edge of a person. Like a hand, maybe, or the side of a face. Blurry, but definitely not mine. Not unless I grew a beard overnight. I locked myself in the bathroom with my phone after that, heart pounding so loud it hurt my ears. I didn't know what to do. Call the cops? Tell them what? That I had creepy photos but no sign of a break-in? I made myself look at the rest. Some showed me, sleeping. Mouth open, one arm hanging off the bed. I had no idea anyone was there. The last photo was the worst. It was just a few inches from my face. You could see every pore, every eyelash. I was dead asleep. And right at the edge of the photo, just before the frame cut off, you could see fingers. Whoever took it was standing right over me. I sat in the bathroom for a long time after that. Maybe an hour. I kept listening for sounds, footsteps, breathing, anything, but the apartment stayed dead quiet. When I finally worked up the nerve, I went through every inch of the place. Under the bed, in the closets, inside the kitchen cabinets, even though there's no way a grown man could fit in there. Nothing. No one. I checked the front door again. Chain still latched, deadbolt locked. No scratches, no marks around the frame. Same with the windows. I live above ground level, and the only fire escape is on the other side of the building. The building has security cameras by the front and back entrances. I figured if someone came in, there would be footage. So I called the landlord. Told him my phone was acting weird and I thought someone might have messed with it. He said he'd check the footage for me. Sounded annoyed but agreed. An hour later, he called back. Said he looked through everything from midnight to 7 a.m. Didn't see anyone come in or out of the building except for the paperboy at 5:30. No deliveries, no maintenance guys. No one. He told me maybe I had a nightmare and took the pictures myself. Said it happens. Sleep paralysis or something. I didn't argue. I just said thanks and hung up. But I knew I hadn't taken those pictures. There's no way. That day, I didn't leave the apartment. I kept all the lights on. Even the bathroom light. I kept my phone with me everywhere I went. I didn't even want to shower. At some point, I realized the balcony door, the one that leads to a tiny little ledge barely big enough for a chair, had a lock on the handle, but not a deadbolt. It would have been easy for someone to slip a tool between the door and frame and pop it open. Especially if they knew what they were doing. I don't know how they would have gotten up there, though. The walls are smooth concrete. No pipes, no footholds. That night, I pushed the couch against the balcony door. Stupid, probably wouldn't have stopped anyone determined, but it made me feel a little better. I didn't sleep much. I kept jolting awake at every creak and pop the building made. I kept checking my phone, terrified I'd find new photos. Morning finally came, and there was nothing new in the gallery. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend for a few days after that. Didn't even tell him the full story. Just said my place felt creepy lately. A week later, I moved. Different building, different part of town. No balcony this time. I got extra locks installed, bought a security camera for inside the apartment. I still have the photos saved on an old flash drive, even though I don't like looking at them. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just crazy. Maybe the landlord was right. Maybe it was a dream, and somehow I got up and took all those pictures without remembering. But I know what I saw, and I know those weren't my fingers in the last photo.